Raising consciousness and awakening mankind. This is End of Days Radio. Hello, everybody. Welcome to End of Days Radio. This is your host, Daniel. I'm coming at you all the way from the beautiful, shimmering Emerald City, right here in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. Very exciting episode tonight. We will be joined by Sevan Bomar. James Evans Bomar III, born on October 22nd, 1978 in Detroit, Michigan, is the author of The Code to the Matrix, developer of the Planetary Resistance and the Wholeness Foundation. He's deeply involved in universal transformation and currently resides in Costa Rica. He is also involved in spiritual activation for all organic species. So this is really exciting. I know I say this every time, and I'm going to keep saying it every time, but we have a really great episode ahead tonight. We're going to focus a little bit more on spirituality. Right? We've done pretty much everything, but have we really pursued that spiritual side of things? I don't think so, and that is one of the major things that I wanted to focus on with this version of the show. I don't mean religion, I don't mean that boring type of spirituality, I mean the actual real stuff. The real stuff that is going to basically make you feel a little different when you hear it. You're not gonna just hear it and it's gonna sound like mumbo jumbo like a lot of organized religions, because this is the real stuff, and that's what we want to focus on. If you did not hear last week's End of Days Radio, I highly recommend you go back and listen to that. We did a show on Bigfoot hunting with Peter von Puttkamer, and we talked about a lot of great stuff after the interview as well. So if you haven't heard that, feel free to go back and check that out. A lot of stuff going on in the news today, and a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. So if you stay with us after this interview, I'm going to be talking to the fans, of course, as well as going over some paranormal news stories. I also have some letters from listeners that I want to read to you guys, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and dial up our guest tonight, and we can go ahead and get this party started. Hello.
Good evening, Daniel.
Hi, Sevan. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing exceptionally well, man. It's great connecting with you.
Yeah, definitely. It's exciting having a guest like yourself on tonight, because I've told my listeners that we want to focus a little bit more on spirituality as opposed to, the aliens and the Sasquatches and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to have you here. It's something really special on tonight's End of Days Radio.
Most definitely. I'm definitely, I love to come on these shows and really, express just the magnitude of what we're dealing with. I've definitely listened to some of your past podcasts, and I was hoping to, demystify a lot of things, and for us to, take that walk on the wild side, but also really, make some sense of what people are experiencing and what we're experiencing, and start getting some cohesion. And, and definitely looking deeper into the spiritual aspects of things. I mean, I'm a big fan of realizing that everything is spiritual to me. Like, I don't really put it into a different category. Even if I'm learning something about, a variety of things, my spiritual being is still increasing from that. But it's important also, of course, for everyone to learn more and more about how to integrate different sides of their consciousness, because obviously we're not dealing with just one side. So, and I guess I have to clarify that, we talk even to ourselves. So there's different dynamics to what we constantly get into daily. And so this is going to be an interview about, all of those things, I was hoping.
Excellent. And I definitely want to delve into all of those particular things. But just to start us off, I do just want to get to know you just a little bit. And of course, you can fill in as many details or leave them out as you'd like. But I'd like to just hear a little bit about where you are from and how did you develop this very intense interest in spiritual matters?
Well, what I'll tell people is I'm just like you in the sense of if you were walking in my shoes. And I believe that we all have these similarities and connections with each other. I see the entire earth as just a seed that actually comes from one being, rather than seeing just all the separate things that are created within that seed. And because of that, that means that many people have these connections. And it's basically like if I went left, if I grew up in this, and when you went right, if I grew up in this area that you didn't grow up in, or you were in another state, and, you know, all those different things that we experience in life, how it takes us down different avenues. And who I am is my avenue happened to take me down a very spiritual path when I was younger. And I had some very interesting abilities, mainly with lucid dreaming and bringing things back from the lucid realm when I was younger. And I actually thought that that was something that everyone was capable of doing until way later on. And I found out that obviously that wasn't something that people just do normally. But I've always been spiritually inclined because I was homeschooled and I was raised in an environment where my mother was aware of a lot of the things that were going on in the school curriculum and also in many other religious structures. However, she did have a very strong inclination to find what we know as God. And so I was taken along on that journey. And I will also begin to, because of some of the things that were implemented within the household, such as spiritual books became TV and all the different things that would make the house, let's say, holy. I was basically submerged in this kind of reality. And so my X-Men were like the ancient, the ancient books of like the City of Pigrapha, the Apocrypha, you know, some of the Sumerian works and things that talk about, you know, ancient cultures and the connections within these cultures and the many enigmatic characters and prophets and angels and all sorts of things, demons, prophets and priests. I may have said that twice, but, you know, just all the things that are in that world, which is actually no different than X-Men when you really think about it.
You
And
know,
so
that was crossing my mind. I was kind of thinking as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, some of those characters are almost like the mythological types of today.
For sure. I mean, in fact, obviously, most of those characters are that we're seeing today have been inspired off of all those ancient traditions. We were big fans of going outside of just, you know, the singular books. So let's say you have the Quran and you have the Bible, and both of those books really encourage that you don't read any other books. So that wasn't really the rules around our houses. You know, we looked more and more to expand into all traditions to see if there was a unified component. So basically what happened to me is I just got so tired of it. By the age of 13, 14, you know, I had been, you know, so deeply involved in spiritual study that I had more of a slingshot effect. I really wanted to get into the world and, you know, and enjoy all of what I was catching every now and then when I could sneak some view at TV. And so I kind of went into the world with this, you know, just very strong, just looking to really kind of go inside out and experience just the physical side of the reality. And it wasn't long until I went through a complete cycle and then realized that basically there wasn't much in the world and it didn't even hold a candlestick to what I was already experiencing on a spiritual side. And so I went through this, what many would call occultation. And what that is that, you know, whether you're aware of it or not, and most people are becoming more aware of it, we're actually living life basically backwards. And so this means that many things that we're experiencing now have basically already happened. And you can tell that by synchronicities. So if like in a synchronicity that you experience, the odds are so high that that whole thing would even take place randomly, that so it had to be kind of like specifically for you, then you could start kind of gandering like in a reverse engineering way that, well, maybe, you know, maybe there's something else going on here. At least that's the biggest question that most people ask. And then, of course, when you look deeper, you find that, yeah, there's basically some invisible molds and invisible templates that when we start to get on the path of wanting to come into total realization, it begins to school us, if you may, in the arts of spiritual, mental, and physical matters on a truth level, like in all of those, physical, mental, like if you know the truth to the physical bodies, if you know the truth to the mind, all of those can be perceived as deeply spiritual and riveting works if you just get the truth of the matter. So that's what I've been doing. So I'm 38 now, and you know, this started since I touched into this world, and so I've walked the path of an adept. But in the sense of, you know, many people, they go and they study and they say, okay, well, I want to learn, you know, these ancient traditions, or I want to become like a priest, or, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on right now where people, I just want to, you know, I want to do magic. And what happens is it's like they're almost trying too hard in a sense. And what I mean by that is that generally something of such a personal and depth nature is literally like it's what you are rather than what you're becoming. So you just are really uncovering more about yourself. And so in that sense, it just, you start coming into these scenarios and circumstances, and they just start speaking to you, and you have this really unique experience, and it starts growing your spiritual potential. And so what I've done is I've been documenting that for about 7 years, my growth, and just started noticing how many other people are having the similar type of experiences, or, even weird stuff from, similar appearances to. So we started this venture of basically beginning to find a unified field for all of that, some kind of blueprint that lets us know, or gives us a tool, if you may, to study, experience something that is so vast that you would need to configure thousands, millions of people to begin to perceive what it actually is. So that's somewhat of a, if I can nutshell it, I'm on the path of the adept.
Now, I've heard you mention some principles that are Gnostic in nature. Would you consider yourself to be Gnostic?
Well, Gnosticism means the ability to know without being told. And the deeper root of the word Gnostic actually comes out to serpent. And so, in every tense, you could see how it's like yes and no. What I mean by that is, not in Gnosticism, you find that a group of people begin to tap deeply into the vibrations of knowledge that are already present within the planetary spheres. And you could tap into that by meditating. You could tap into that by looking at stars. You can tap into that basically by focusing. So Gnosticism is so vast just as an art itself that there's different types of Gnostics. It doesn't mean that all Gnostics are good and doesn't mean that all Gnostics are bad. Like, we always have like an ability to say, okay, well, Gnosticism, that's a good tradition. But we have to understand that there were actual Gnostics that were utilizing the Gnostic and the Tantric powers to make communication with certain types of beings. And then Gnosticism later on start actually becoming more interwoven with Hermeticism. And then that just, it evolved and it brought on something else that wasn't what its original state is, which is, I guess, what happens on planets, right? So in certain senses, I'm really cautious of the words that I use. So I'll say agnostic because I have the ability to know things without being told, which is also what Kabbalah means. Kabbalah means oral resuscitation, or meaning that it's never written down, that something tells it to you, and then that's how you learn about it. And, this is just to demystify this kind of thing. This is also what happens in many times when we start talking to ourselves in serious situations. Sometimes you may be using some kind of substance and you start learning how to do certain mudras, or, you learn how to do different things with your body. And all this is coming from this internal inspiration. So that's actually what Gnosticism truly is tapping into that inspiration, being able to differentiate, what this voice is and where it's coming from and where it may get you, and then start utilizing it as a tool to further your experience here.
Why is it? This is something that I suppose I've always been a little bit curious about. I mean, of course, as I was watching some of your past interviews and reading about you, I was really blown away by how much you know about this stuff. And I also found myself asking a question: why is it that some people seem to get this whole spiritual side of things, and some people, they don't even get it at all? They're just so materialistically orientated.
That actually has a lot to do with, I guess some people would say genetics, but really what it is that you have to realize that in the sphere that we're in, this bubble, that there's a lot of things going on that you actually can't see. There's a lot of particles and things that are moving around. There's a lot of interactions. There's a lot of, there's different realms, et cetera, that are all layered on top of this one, right? So what happens is a person that's very aware, and let's say, for instance, this is measured within how present the person is. This is measured within actually how much they can really feel themselves in this reality, right? Now, that kind of person is, of course, going to be like pinged. They're going to be like trying to figure out everything. They're going to be like looking at everything and trying to find some kind of connection with it and them. And that's just a product of being present on this realm. Now, some people, and this is just, what I believe in my research, that's from the data that's coming from my research. Some people are actually in another reality more primarily. So this means that they actually have only so much energy to fuel this version of the program that's running of them in this reality. So they appear to be in many senses abstract, and they can actually get more into what would be the instinctual levels of the reality. And instinctual could literally be like what you see going on in the jungle where, you got a bird with a red breast and it, dances around with this red breast and is trying to impress this girl. And then all of that is just set up for the whole interaction of the continuous reproduction or keeping the link in the chain continuous. So let's say, for instance, that if a person only has 25%, let's say, of their being, their whole being or consciousness here, then they're going to be a little abstract and they're going to need to roll into like more of a hive mind program, which is more like an autonomous kind of lifestyle. It's like Groundhog's Day versus the one who's bringing more of themselves into this reality. So you can imagine like we've scattered ourselves across different realities, and the realities that we feel like, okay, this one's worth something. There's something to be gained here. I'm working on something. Then we start pulling more of ourselves off of those other realities, and we start coming here, and that's what people call consciousness. Now, the way that you can prove that is when you look at babies, you notice that in the beginning, it's like even the baby is kind of glazed over. And then as the baby gets older, obviously they say, oh yeah, that's just development. But actually more, if you're monitoring closely, what you're seeing is the baby is now gathering as they're getting older, more and more of the spirit or the character of who they truly are. And then you start basically seeing the lights turn on and you start seeing them basically become more aware, more present on the dimension. And the reason why we know that that's happening is because the knowledge about the chakras, which is the chakras, the information that's come from those metaphysically and also empirical information from the ancient traditions, is the chakras are developing during different times of your life. So let's say the root chakra is developing between the age of 1 and 7. And what this root chakra is doing is it's basically phase locking you. It's meaning that it's bringing the makeup and the resonance of who you are who you are and who you're going to become. And it's coalescing that inside your body, and then you're starting to develop. So again, for people who don't seem to be kind of like present, they may never actually get to a point where they feel like that this is something that they want to start to wake up completely in. And, and that's okay. Like at this point, you got to get to a point where you're not doing too much judging. You're doing analyzing, observing, because when you're in analyzation and observer mode, then you can actually get beyond where when we make a general judgment and stop right there, you can kind of go beyond. And as you start doing that more, you could do that with the more you get familiar with doing that, you could do it with pretty much anything. You get concepts of the supreme being, subjective planes, all knowing, all the way back down to Trump elections, artificial intelligence, deep thinking, quantum technology, quantum mechanics. So basically what I'm saying is once you become good at this one thing, you become good at everything. And this is, what's mentioned in many of the alchemical treaties about the transformation of a person. Like, I'm not going to say humanity, the transformation that a person can put themselves through, where they literally take dirt, which is earth themselves, the fleshly body, and then turn it into gold, meaning actually becoming one of the noble metals. And all of the correspondences, because obviously this is like code. So all the correspondences to that code known as gold, that you basically have refined your physical body into one of the highest noble metals. Then, of course, at that stage, you're completely conductive. And what this does is it gives you the vision. It gives you the sight. So we're talking about something very real here, by the way. This is not, hey, let's have a good time on talking about sci-fi, because this actually can connect with anything. But realistically, what's happening to the body is the more conductive you become, the more energy or degrees, which is it's termed, that you can hold inside of your vessel without basically going nuts or going megalomania. then the more you can become perceptive of what this truly is that we're existing in. And I'll say one more thing. See, the thing is that, so obviously when a person is attempting to become perceptive, we do that by learning things, meaning like actually reading stuff. And what happens is that there's only a certain level that you can get to with thinking, because, thinking is just going to keep asking more questions. There are going to be more answers, more questions. And I'm not saying this is not the way you want to go, because many things that you need to do in the reality, even basic stuff like operating certain mechanics, you need to know it like that. But there's this another state, and this state is very important because you could really get frustrated on the path. And I'm sure many of us have been frustrated on the path with, trying to figure out, if something happened really 15,000 years ago and that there was nobody that you could really rely upon to give you the truth about that. And you feel like you need to know that information in order for you to move on with what so this could get, really frustrating, because after a while it's like, you basically, you're erratic. So what happens is that the all-knowing state is where we can always go to, and it's basically a state where we know everything, and this space actually exists. And many people sometimes refer to it as the Zen or the zone, but you could tap into it by, of course, not thinking. So this is where certain techniques and practices come into play, where you can literally go into this zone by not thinking and start absorbing more. I can't say necessarily answers in the way like, okay, you get data back, but you just get yourself back. I'll just put it like that.
Okay. This next question, this has to do a little bit with what you just mentioned with the chakra system. Are we in some kind of matrix, and is it actually suppressing our chakra system?
For sure, we're in a matrix. Remembering that the word matrix is actually the Greek term for matrix. And what that means, I guess the closest word that we have in English is mistress, but it's basically a nest or a womb of lattice, a lattice-based womb that continues to spawn. So this is actually what we're in right now. That's why there's so many life forms, so many thoughts, so many ideas and creations. And a lot of the rules to how that operates is very similar to the matrix itself, meaning like coding and programming and those kind of things, because, a lot of the mechanics work just like that. And we can talk about that later. But the truth about being suppressed by the matrix, now the matrix, if we understand, it's like a bubble. So in many tenses, this whole reality is under pressure. And that's why, of course, if you go high in the air or low in the water, you're going to hit some real pressure, and, it's pretty intense. And so this was known alchemically as the crucible. So if you could imagine a crucible is a place where you're kind of in, and then there's pressure on you. But the purpose of this was to actually make you 1,000 times stronger. So anytime you hermetically seal something or put it into a crucible in chemistry, which is basically the study of blackness. Basically, chem means black. So chemistry basically means the study of what's unknown. So chemistry has been going on for a long time. So when you're studying chemistry, you study chemistry, you come to these conclusions. And so for a person, what it is that because this is like it's a great reward. So there has to be somewhat of an equal amount of energy spent for the reward. And this gets a little bit interesting. And these rewards have to do with higher levels of accolades, not so much as just having millions of dollars, but just higher accolades in the universe. If you survive the crucible, and also if you actually get to a point where you figure a way out of the matrix and you actually begin to implement that template into others in the matrix, like basically, I don't want to make it sound like just a game, but you're scoring really high on the galactic currency level. And what I mean by that is that where much is given, much is required. So this is like, all the ancient texts speak of being able to use your talents that you have, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, the pentagram body, the soul that's inside of it, all those different things, like we're fully equipped. And seeing, okay, so what are you going to do with it as this human being if, you start becoming awake here? And so, so that's what we're dealing with. So that's why there's definitely some pressure in the system, because there's limits There's rules, there's boundaries, and that's actually what creates pressure within any system. And those limits and rules and boundaries are to make sure that there's no glitches in the program. And what glitches are is basically a human flying. So you could see yourself flying in your sleep because you have your own programming stage right there. You can control your dreams through lucid dreaming. And so you have your own world, basically. But in this world, because this world is run by a stronger mind, meaning that the mind that's actually hosting this platform that we're in is a large, large mind. So in that sense, it basically requires us to figure out about ourselves and to grow strong enough so that we can overcome the larger mind that would want us to just follow our role in the program. And that's what people feel as the pressure, because they're like, man, something's kind of like forcing me. Well, they don't even say that anymore. They just feel like they don't want to go to work and they still have to go. That's called being forced. So what happens is that you start realizing that, yeah, there's actually a grand structure. There's actually a hierarchy within the system. There are sub-programmers in the system, meaning literally groups and factions that are hacking the original matrix, putting their own sub-program in the matrix and basically catching you up into that nucleus of that sub-program. And so just to explain that very, very clearly, on the outside, let's say, for instance, in nature, that is the original matrix. And when we're talking about terms like the code to the matrix, what that would be is basically the language that is used, the geometric language that is used to create this reality that we're looking at, like the language that's being used in the back room that created this reality. Now, the Royal Society had penetrated all that knowledge within the last 300 years, so they know how to operate the back room of this reality. And then after that, what they created was...
I'm sorry, Sevan. Just to stop you real quick. By Royal Society, who do you mean by that?
If you go to Google and you just type in the Royal Society, what you'll find is that there was actually type in the Enlightenment era, right? You type in the Enlightenment era in Google, and you'll find that 100 years ago that the entire world went through the same thing that we're going through right now. And this was known as the Age of Reason or the Age of Enlightenment. And this is during the 1800s, right? And so during this time, you basically had the royalty, the people with the cash and the power, basically sending out decrees across the land that anyone who knew anything that was strange or mystical or have found anything or any books or any stuff like that, that they could bring it to basically the rulers of their area, and they would be paid for it. So during that time, there was this surge of all this knowledge that was brought in from all these different places, even Iran and all these different places. And the societies that, you were seeing today, when we're talking about the Priory of Sion, and those societies were formed from people from the Enlightenment era. And during the Enlightenment era, they basically, down to the atom, discovered exactly how the reality was constructed. So once that was concluded, it's almost like everything went into secrecy, like everything went into a room. There was like a big hush order on everything that was discovered. And from that point on, it was definitely the agenda of creating a sub-matrix, which would be basically like a world within a world that you would think is real because it operates on the mechanics of the things that you know are real, but it's a hack on it. So there's a spin. And, obviously that spin is quite apparent now. And it comes in things like time. There's no such thing as time, gravity, even the whole idea of not even knowing that this is a program, because the purpose of this program, let's rewind here a little bit, because, when you start saying program about people's real reality, they sometimes take offense to that. But it's important to realize what the ancients said about this particular reality that we're in. They didn't actually come here to stay here forever. That was not the goal, obviously, because we all die. They actually came here to learn a code. This is literally a school. That's why they call it a university, a universe, or a university. And in this code, just like in programming, you would need to learn the codes before you can program. So this code is trees, the geometry you see within trees, birds, insects, animals. all these different things that are in the actual code of the matrix itself, the real one. When you know that, then when you leave here, and you most definitely will, you can actually create your own based on you basically determine what things you like and what you don't like. So that was the gift that was given to us, is to come here to learn the mechanics of how to build worlds. And then, because we're like babies right now in a sense to our oversouls and what they look like and what they're capable of doing, but we still go through this process of actually becoming a oversoul. So that means, you come here, you learn the language, the code, you learn how to program your reality. And then when you learn how to control your dream, when you die, you basically go in like you're still controlling your dream. And then you just don't have to wake back up into this reality. And you start living in the world that you already started constructing day after day when you're going into the lucid dream.
Now, what you just described now, is this basically what the Anunnaki were doing? Uh-oh, did I just open up a can of worms?
What the Anunnaki were doing is kind of like almost opposite. And it's just because, when you really study the Anunnaki Gigi, you really have to cross cultures, because, the two strongest spiritual factions that are on the earth today, which are basically, I would say, the OTO, which is the Golden Dawn and their chthonic connections. And then the Kemetan system, which comes out now as what people would know as Voodoo. And so when you really study the entities that run those programs, which have been running for thousands and thousands of years, according to our perceptions, you find that actually there were sorcerers, or as what we would term it as, but, chief mages that were capable of enthralling thousands of people into a reality. Like basically they could just put an entire reality around you and you wouldn't even be aware of what was going on. This is, there's things in the world that are very potent. I just want to make this very clear for people. You can smell certain things and lose your mind and never come back. They have agents like that, as they call it, in chemistry, right? So there's things that, are so strong, like uranium, you can't even be around it. You just melt, right? So there's some potent stuff in the realities. So what happens is that in some of the older realities, there's always this idea that will never die in created worlds that equal the hierarchical structure. So there's always then someone who wants to be on top externally. And they will use the crafts and the vices that they are capable of harnessing on the planet and in their era in order to control the people that are around them. We're witnessing this today. But the thing is that now what everyone was generally witnessing is the technological and the knowledge and the curriculum-based form of control. Back in the day, it was all what we would term today as magic. It was all bending of the mind, bending of the will and the consciousness, manipulating the elements and conquering, larger life forms in order to bring them into your sway. So this was basically like a role-playing game, RPG going on in the past. And during that process, many entities, and this would make up some of the Anunnaki, many of those entities actually gained a heavy level of power to where they began to literally enslave their, the subgroups of people that were developing. No different than a person could take 12 dogs, I guess, and start to enslave them and make them do work and et cetera, et cetera. So
it's kind of like how even now there's still people that claim to worship Anu and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, first of all, is they would still need to get a lot of their facts straight, because most of the knowledge that they're looking at about the Anunnaki has been just written by people who don't even know anything about the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki come forth from a Sudanese cult that was a matriarch. And meaning that the actual chief Anu wasn't even the chief in that culture. It was actually the female. And that actually comes out as Ishtar or Inanna. And then what happened is that there was agreeable Anunnaki and disagreeable Anunnaki. The Anunnaki had awareness of exactly how to keep their geometry perpetual. So there was basically a group of them that were what we would say is good, and then a group of them that were supposedly bad, and they all stayed together to keep balance. And there's a lot of knowledge that says that basically the moon is still the overall structure that the Anunnaki remain in, and they're static, so they're not like beings that move around. That's why they call them dead but dreaming. They say they man the ship. So what they're saying is that it's almost like seeing a crystal that is containing a large amount of data, literally emitting from our atmosphere onto us all of their entire program, and their programming system being linked into many of what we would call the major star systems like Orion, etc. Because the Anunnaki are 100% connected to Orion, 100% connected to the Cedars, or what we would call the Saturnalian or Sun type planets, as we were saying they are. But basically the energies that move throughout this massive ocean that seed the life forms that you're seeing being created. Okay, so these are seeders, and so that's really what the Anunnaki's overall reputation became, is similar to Jason and the Argonauts, after the story is corrupted. But seafarers, and the sea is basically the space that we're calling space, traveling that area in order to create these seed-based bubbles that we're calling planets, in order to keep this Orion-based template, which is drawn out as a pentagram. This is the human body, continuously in progression, because this chain, which is like a pentagram chain, a 5-base chain, a coil that's unbreakable, to keep this chain continuing across a chasm, which is what chaos is known as, because there's no floor to it. So literally creating a rock in a space that doesn't have any, you see what I mean? There's like nothing to lay anything sound on. So notice what kind of type of advancement we're talking about. That's another thing. It's like, because when you start, I'm even trying to articulate this, and I'm not using Sumerian, right? So it's so difficult to articulate something about what I'm explaining in English, because the mind in English is binary. So it's constantly like, okay, are they good guys or are they bad guys? And the reason why the mind does that is because it has to choose what side of the consciousness it's going to send down the data that you're trying to process. And so it's literally saying, just as you have two eyes, hey, are they bad or are they good? And again, when we stop looking at things like that, then we can move further and we could get more of the story and realize that actually the Anunnaki is more like a generalized term for the same entities that were in the Hindu and the Persian traditions, the same entities that were in the Toltec traditions, the same entities that were in the Kemetan traditions as far as the beings that they're drawing on the wall, the same thing as the Sumerian tradition as far as the birdmen, etc. But all of these beings are actually coming from different, they're like chimeras, so they're coming from different parts of the cosmos. And, and we're just kind of generalizing when we say, well, the Anunnaki, that would be like the most PR'd term, but not necessarily giving you the description of all the entities that are moving through the sphere and have kin or children in this bubble.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That basically we're not talking about the nuts and bolts aliens that Sitchin talked about. That's way completely different than what actually happened.
Well, actually, let me explain that to you, just so this is very clear to you. And I'm really enjoying this conversation, by the way, because you're asking all the right questions. I feel like sometimes that I get onto certain shows and I'm, it's just like I just have to talk about other stuff. And this is really like my passion has always been to demystify. And since I know so much about this kind of stuff and I've experienced so much about this, it's really awesome to begin to talk about it. But the thing is that, okay, so what you're dealing with when you're talking about larger life forms, like what they try to describe in many of these books, like Pazuzu and, let's say some of the original Nagas and these kind of entities, is what you're dealing with is outside of this, like outside of this bubble. And that's the easiest way I can explain it. What you have is a vast ocean. And I wouldn't even I wouldn't even doubt that it's actually water in the traditional sense is how we understand water. And, this is very controversial stuff because, a lot of people believe that, we've been to space. And, I know that we can go pretty far out there, but whether we're actually in space or not, I believe that there's actually that because we're under pressure, and this can be proved chemically, that there's actually something surrounding this entire realm that we're in that's sealing us in. And in the event that you break that, then water's coming in. And the reason why that this may have some validity is because of, one, the ancestors always referred to space as the ocean, and they saw them both as the same. Two, flat Earth. It definitely has some stuff that's to be looked at as far as mathematics and things are concerned. And people know that I'm not necessarily a flat Earth junkie. I think it gets a little bit fanatical, but the reality is there are some things to be addressed that should be addressed. And I've been able to address those things, especially in lucid sleep, by realizing that we're surrounded by water. So if you can imagine then, and you don't have to take my word for this. So imagine what we would say is as big as the cosmos is really like an ocean then. So remember, like water is in the air right now. Like even though you're in a dry room, if you throw a dehumidifier in there, we're going to be able to pull water out of the air, right? So just imagine like in this space that's so big that there's also just water completely in that space. So what kind of life forms, if you've already seen like some of the things that they found on the bottom of the ocean, like not to mention the thing with all the teeth and the light in front of it, but some of the more larger squid, right? And then even whales. Like if people ever been next to these things in the ocean, man, it's like it's intense. Because you're looking at something literally the size of a bus, and this is just a whale. So now let's imagine the cosmos is basically liquid. What kind of life forms will you get out there? So what's known is that when we go into, let's say, the astral plane, like when you can get into that certain space in meditations or in your dream, you actually leave this bubble, and you go beyond, and you go into that space. Not all the time. Most people can stay within just this network of systems and, dreaming of stars, the as below stars, like, actors and stuff like that. And, dreaming of themselves doing different things. But many people have dreams and they actually go beyond. And then when you start going beyond, you start noticing the alarming amount of different types of life forms. Also, the uncanny ability that you already know how to handle yourself out there. That's what I was saying about the all-knowing. And also the definition of why there are so many accounts of different kinds of life forms that people have been in touch with one way or another, and where those life forms generally reside when, it's daylight. So let us look to what's going on out there, because all these traditions are all saying this, and it's just people have a different way of interpreting things. But just to simplify it, there are some different life forms out there, and they're conscious and sentient, and they live in a vast field that is not as limited as ours. So just like fish, when you put fish into a very small tank, they start to not grow. Basically, they don't get any bigger than a certain size. But then when you put them in a bigger tank, they get bigger. So imagine then that these life forms are in a bigger tank, so they're a lot more larger, and this is what makes their consciousness more vast in that tense. Yes, I'll just say it like that. I won't give the parody of that meaning.
So basically, to kind of reiterate that in an attempt in my own words, these things are like extra dimensional in the sense that they're coming from a place that is a greater reality, and they kind of have to shrink themselves down to interact with us.
Yeah, I mean, one of them can fill 50 or 60,000. I mean, not even to give real numbers here, but 100,000 people can be filled by one spirit. And, that's actually what Freemasonry is originally about in its deepest recesses, is filling groups of men with certain spirits. And that's called, that's why they get degrees, which, of course, degrees is also how fire is measured. Fire is known as the spirit. So there are different vast life forms out there that fill different human beings. And people have to ask themselves when they're just on basically the automaton program, what is filling them? because they're basically on more or less an autopilot until they choose to take the wheel. And while they're on that autopilot, there is something that actually has control. There is a vibration and a frequency that they are harmonized in that actually controls their vessel. So yeah, that's what we're talking about.
That kind of begs another question, because there was a race or some set of beings that were supposed to be here before the Anunnaki, called the sometimes the Old Ones or Ancient Ones, and their leader was Tiamat. What could those possibly be? The same thing? Maybe beings that just got here first, or something different entirely?
Well, this is basically the ground you're standing on. So these are the primordial forms that are actually in agreement with one another, like the rainbow, which is a sign of the covenant. So these beings are in agreement that their powers, because that's what they're referred to, the elders or the powers, that they would basically yoke themselves together and utilize their powers in order to create a reality, to create an anchor in the chasm. And Tiamat, who is their mother, known as the mother of monsters, actually gives us what we know today as the Zodiac. So those 12 monsters, quote unquote, are spread across the sky as the stars. And their emissions, which we would say is stardust particles, are what is composing much of what you're seeing here in the Matrix. And so, yeah, that the elder ones were basically, and this is why it was always cautioned, at least in those tales, to not even attempt to communicate with them, because they don't speak English. Literally, that it's a whole different kind of experience and a whole different kind of life. If we can just imagine, now, like what the stage that we're living in now and the kind of conversations we would have, even only 4,000 years ago, and we're going back pretty far, trying to have this same type of conversation with, let's say, someone that is intelligent and knows about powers, it's going to be a mismatch. And it's just because they're living it and they're experiencing and they're seeing it around them all the time, versus for us, there's a wool over our eyes, or there's literally another realm in between us and the real thing that doesn't allow us to peer through that generally.
And you did mention flat Earth a little bit, that there might be some reality there. Could you elaborate on that just a little more?
Yeah, just to make it, just to condense it, is that basically a lot of stuff doesn't make sense. I mean, just from the fact of being on a ball, why don't we see pictures? They're sending us pictures from Australia upside down. Like, with all these satellites out there, they know thousands of satellites. Why don't we really see, any spectacular kind of imagery, and this is after 50 to 80 years. We even have Hollywood doing better than what NASA is doing as far as what it's producing. But even more so than that, spinning on a ball going at thousands of miles an hour, and then we don't feel it. Like, all of this stuff, it just actually doesn't add up. But what does add up is what was coming from the ancient works. So I'm not like jumping on the flat earth bandwagon. I'm just going with what I've read in the ancient works and what I personally experienced, that the reality is shaped like a disc, and it has a very thick firmament, or what we call the netherworld. What's below us, all that strata that's been built up from the bones and all that stuff of different things, the tree trunks and all this different stuff that's continuously growing on this organism that we're on, that as you keep punching down, instead of it getting thicker and more into like a magma, like they have it in their diagrams, it actually gets a lot thinner. And you start never being able to escape water down there. And this is what the Russians found out when they dig 12 kilometers down into Earth. And so what it comes out as is that I would think the biggest important thing about realizing that maybe that the Earth is not as how they're saying it is that there was a simple play when the New World Order, the real aspects of the New World Order came into play. The first move that they needed to make was actually to change the idea of how people saw the world. So if you're understanding this deep levels of programming and mind control, if you can go from a world that everyone knows is a disc that you're literally walking around, and to this bubble right away you have a new world inside of all those people's minds. And from that point, you can begin to build on that new world. And that's how, that's what programming is. It's literally geometry. It's like it's putting a sphere into your mind, which is a bubble. And then now your world is being built within that sphere. And then, so it just, the program just keeps feeding off of itself until next thing you know, you're buying into this idea that you're being born. And so then you buy into the idea that you die. And that's the beginning and the end of the program. So, what we're talking about is we're talking about looking at this stuff and starting to demystify it and saying, okay, what actually is really happening here is that this is more like a DVD or a disc, and all the strata, which is people's feelings, emotions, memories, are first going up in the cloud, which is the condensation of our ideas, like all the precipitation that comes from our efforts. And then it coalesces up there until it eventually becomes so solid that it falls back down to the earth. Then it becomes like a seed germ. This is like even your ideas, they start off as seeds and then they birth themselves into manifestation. And then it starts to basically grow into something in the reality. But because it's finite, because it's physical, it will eventually perish. Meaning, like if I buy a brand new Ferrari today, I don't know, 70, 80 years from now, 150 years from now, it will be somewhere in a junkyard or something smashed down, or it may be even a part of a cup or a new machine, right? Because it's got to go through its entire process. So everything in this reality then that's solid is going into this process, and it's actually becoming more and more of what's making this solid for us. And I'm trying to take us across this bridge to where we stop seeing a reality as just solid versus realizing that we can make something solid by giving it value and giving it worth. So that's our power. So when we have memories, right, and we build up a reality around us, and our parents do it and their parents do it and people around us do it, this becomes like a point-to-point system of solidity where we all believe, at least collectively, that there is an earth and that we going to wake up to this tomorrow. Some may not, but most of everyone here will wake up tomorrow, right? So all of that power of projection, which they even tell you, Napoleon Hill and motivational speakers, they only talk lightly about the power of your focus. So you can imagine if you can get 8 billion people focusing on something, exactly how not only will that manifest in thin air. I love the way they say it like that. Literally manifest in thin air, but also start functioning, thinking, and going on as if it always was going on. You see, so there's something very mystical. That's why I find myself really empowered by this knowledge and information versus, degraded by it. And the reason is because we start realizing that, man, we're just getting started. And this is so big. The only thing that we can do is just grow with it rather than trying to resist it in a sense, meaning trying to stop the growth. Because if you look at, let's say, some of the older people now, or even some of the people that have gone, and the era that they lived through, let's say where the Wright brothers bought the plane and those kind of things, that was still one kind of reality. And I'm sure like a lot of them thought that, man, this is it. But imagine one of those people step into the world today, right now even, and start seeing what we're doing in the laboratory, et cetera. And then, of course, there's even us now, like, oh, they're not using this stuff right, and they know all this knowledge, and, they're keeping their lying and all this kind of stuff. But, man, 300 more years, and then imagine what you would be seeing Earth as. I've seen like Blade Runner and things like that. But, I mean, there's no telling. But the thing is mainly know is that during all those processes, you're going to get these people that are going to be like, no, stop, slam on the brakes. This is wrong. We're going the wrong direction. This is all going to die, blah, blah, blah. And then you're always going to get those kind of people. But then you're going to get the ones that start realizing, well, actually, first of all, I can't die. And the truth is that I know that I wouldn't have put myself into something that I wouldn't be able to completely navigate. I can trust that I can get myself together in this and then start making the efforts to tap into the real deal. And that's why we have plants, right? Like we have all these allies on the dimension. If people would think that for one moment that we're just waiting on some aliens to show up to help us, breath already came to help you. Fire already came to help you. There's so many things that we take for granted because generally we even can't see them. Remember, the most powerful things we actually can't see. So we go about the reality every single day, imagining that we're going to physically see some actual changes, but that's actually not where power is. Power is in what we would know as an unseen place until we discover it. And that's the treasure, because that unseen place is actually inside of you. It's your own mind, right? So when they talk about, and this is why many of the stories, although I don't doubt that this stuff manifested externally, you should look to stories like the Anunnaki and alchemy and all these kind of things for their internal correspondences, because there will always be an internal correspondence to, the dualistic sides of the body, the manning of the ship. Now you've got this body that you're driving around, this reality. It's what's actually allowing you to become perceptive here. You have your five senses. That's the pentagram. And that's, of course, the magic. That's why a lot of people use the pentagram in association with magic, but don't even know what they're doing, even though they know Da Vinci connected it to the human body, that the five base pyramids were encoded in five. And what phi means is fire, right? And so the fire is the passion. And the passion is basically this drive that we have to produce energy, and meaning like everything here is energy, right? Everything is interaction. And a lot of that interaction is combustive. So we literally can actually disagree and have problems. And that's why it's configured on a binary level, just like an engine has two opposite pistons that through their opposite force drive the car. So when we learn that kind of thing, we can kind of like come out of the whole petty side of the reality, like just bottom feeding on the knowledge and the reality, and then elate ourselves because we have the will and the allotment to do that, meaning that our allotment is the universe and the cosmos, that basically everything was given to us. And we can start using that. But again, these powers, remember, we're talking about real power here. So a person that is still trying to figure out how they're going to burn their neighbor like a Sith Lord is not going to be really tapping into any real truthful powers, because their mind is false. Their mind is literally stuck in some kind of program that's not real. So a person is required to basically become alive again. Now, when we study these ancestral works, what we find is that there can become a stage, like I was explaining to you earlier, where we literally can start becoming hollow. Now, when you get older, that starts to happen naturally if you don't really watch it, meaning that you can eat so much bad food and you can get so many bad experiences from the reality and different people that if you start to internalize it, you actually internally start, quote unquote, dying. Now, remember, dying means two, like a die or a dice. And what that means is to split. So all that's really happening is the spirit saying, yo, you're killing it for me. Like, you're just sad all the time, body. I think that we need to really get ready to separate. So that's actually what dying is. So if you don't feel like you want to be here anymore, it starts sending a signal subconsciously into your body like, yo, let's get ready to shut this down. So imagine then if a person starts reversing that and saying, man, I'm like having a ball here. I got the t-shirt. I was out last night on some wild journey through the jungle on some psilocybins or whatever. And now I see deeper now into the reality. So that kind of person is going to be looking at the glasses as half full rather than half empty, right? So this is where the power is actually within our motivation and our own passion. We take inspiration from even terms like don't reinvent the wheel. They're talking about don't reinvent the pentagram. 72 degrees times 5 is 360 degrees. That's a perfect circle. So what's being said is don't reinvent the process of what you see actually taking place in the real matrix nature. All you have to do is learn how that works, and then you will have this perpetual power. Like the world's basically been here. We're trying to count billions of years, but we don't even know how long it's been here. And so this perpetual power that you can turn on to is you. It's your allotment. So even when a person says, well, Tiamat's everybody's mother. It's not just the elders that have spawned from that. So you can take all of those cultures and empower yourself with it by knowing that. Do you connect to, first of all, when a person says, well, I don't know if this is really my culture or not, because they don't even look like me. Well, this is simple math to tell you that you're actually everything and everything is a part of you. Because if we just start taking human beings And we just keep going back, great grandmother to the great grandmother to the great grandmother. And we just keep going back. Pretty soon you get less and less people, less and less people. And you will actually get to 2 people. That's math. We know that that'll happen. So all the races, white, black, whatever, Haitian, whatever you want to call it, will actually all be in those 2 people. And that's math. And then when you'll get eventually to 1 being, which is they call the androgen, and then you'll get, and that's through the door of the subjective plane, into this other realm where everything already is. You see what I mean? So this is the exact process, and you can do that in your meditation. You can literally start collecting yourself, pulling all your judgments and all that, what's good, what's bad, pulling all that back in, cutting all those cords that are pulling power from you, and then start realizing how you keep going back and you keep going back, and then pretty soon you don't even have a race, you don't have a color, you don't have a creed, you don't have any kind of labels. Because if it can be named, it can be controlled. That's the maxims of the mages, right? So if it can be named, it can be controlled. Just like in Genesis, the command is given to Adam, name the animals. So there's the big thing with names, because names are all a part of how you code programs, right? Name means Amen, right? Name, Amen. That term means hidden, the hidden one. So right away, they're even saying that your name, your name's Daniel, my name is James. These are not even our real names. Like somebody gave us these names. It's not our names. What our names are actually this vibrational frequency that never repeats itself twice. So this is why it's, you can't even say your name right now. You do sound weird to people. So I'm just encouraging people to, hey, look at all this stuff that's really being said. And then start really thinking about what's really being said, because when you make it internal, and again, if there's no enemies, all is self. So, if you're going to create a monster for yourself, you're going to be waiting on that monster. He's going to be right. That monster is going to be right there every time you dream, every time you leave the body, whatever, that monster is going to be there. So until you realize that the monster is you, or that you have full control over that monster, then you're always going to face it. So that's what I called devaluating the reality, right? This is how you get your power and get your power back. All the stuff that's going on around you, we give so much credit to. Now, I'm not saying don't observe, like that's what we're here for. We're observers. We experience through observation and we learn through that process. But when we start to judge, then we get into an energetic, literally we put ourselves into an energetic pact or oath with whatever we're trying to judge. So in this tense, let's say, for instance, if I'm saying, well, until the government change, then I'm never going to be happy because they're the way they are. So this is me literally saying that not only does the government have control over me, so I've given them control, they have control over how my world is going to change, how my reality is going to change. And will they ever change? Probably not. So now I'm left at the end of my life without change because something else didn't change. I would never put myself in that kind of position. So I don't care if it's a human being. I don't care if it's a deity. I don't care if it's a story, whatever it is. If you put it above yourself, then you've put it above God. Because based on all these terms, first of all, not even God. Like we have to use supreme being. God actually is just a Germanic king good. And these kings pretty much ruled earth. That's why in Britain they still call them lords. These kings pretty much rule earth like they deified themselves. Look at what they talk about Caesar, right? Caesar deified himself. Pharaoh deified himself. So this means that these men even believe that they were gods on the earth. So if you didn't at least believe the same thing, then they definitely wasn't trying to say that they were lower than you. So people have gotten used to basically this process of these external kings becoming their lord and their gods. And then what has happened is they've been robbed themselves personally of that power and that title, right? And so now we're living thousands of years now, my friend, where this has been going on. So no wonder why then that people being subject to that program life after life, starting to feel like that, hey, maybe I should just go kick it at the club, or maybe I shouldn't even try to pursue it. And it's because we're living right now in the first part of the era to when you now are allowed, based on like higher laws, like what we would say is astronomical laws. Now the vaults of knowledge are now open to you versus this recent cycle that we just came out of, which the Toltecs were recording, was known as a son of light. So in a son of light, everything becomes external. So everyone's looking for external God. People are looking for external ways to heal themselves. And then after 2012, we went into the son of darkness, which most people hear and they're like, oh my goodness, darkness. But what that means is now we're going into the phase where everyone's going to start looking inside now for answers. So they're going to be looking for internal healing. They're going to be looking for the internal God. So you can see how the system in itself is ingenious, because it even encased within itself almost like a fail-safe for when we get lost in our own programs. So this is some dynamic stuff happening. And it's just, the thing is to seize the moment now, because a lot of times people say, well, what, they always look to other equations like, well, why didn't this happen a long time ago? And, just looking to something else. And no, just look at it right now. If you're listening to this, this is just for you. You showed up for yourself, and here's the directions. Now, obviously, there's more to this, and anybody who wants to check out my work, they can definitely check it out. There's tons of it. As you know, Daniel, there's lots of stuff that's there. And then also there's the University, which is like a step-by-step for people who need more of like a curriculum. Because even right now, we've danced through so many topics, and, it's a bit entertaining for anyone just diving through it. But many people who want to master it are like, okay, so where should I even begin? So that's what the University does, is it takes a person to the starting point of what I would say is the 7 or 8 highest arts to know, which one is celestial mechanics. This shows you your relationship with the cosmos, how actually all the star points are inside your body. It gives you all the charts and everything that are for that. But it basically takes the demoralized person, because the programming going on in the reality and in the submatrix that we're in is to demoralize its citizens. That was a Prussian system that was bought into the United States, created our school systems, created even what we call master's degrees, created all of that stuff. There was to basically get the person to where they become schooled. Now, school means, it's a German word, to become the accepted thing. Now, look, notice the terminology even is already a little offensive, but it literally means the society is trying to design us to become accepted by it. And then when we get into that whole thing, this means that, well, I can never be good enough for you. I'm literally trying to be good enough for you, right? And so what that leads to eventually, if we don't find success right away, is demoralization, because we feel like we haven't been accepted by the reality. This is just all going on within the programming, and people are not even noticing. And then so when you're demoralized, then it's easy for someone to slip a fast one on you and say, well, your God is actually up there in heaven and not inside of you, right? And that kind of stuff ensues. So right now, knowledge is coming out, and that's why we use the term understand. Knowledge and experience is coming out to allow us to understand what's happening. And this is allowing us to literally stand within, the term, like, if you don't stand for something, then you'll fall for anything. So this inner stand is basically a person starting to discover themselves. That's why I don't stand forth as the central character in the theme and the guru and all of that. I put the person first. I'm just documenting my own experience. It's working. Like, I'm literally experiencing some massive stuff, and I'm also extremely grounded. I have things going on in the reality. We've even set up a form of employment for people. As far as knowledge, we've built the first open source spirituality platform. I'm continuously growing. I grow into all different fields. I even know VR. I know 3D printing. I know all these different things, because none of it says, because I study it and I even utilize it, that I'm good or I'm evil. What says that is what I choose to do with it, right? And so that's what I think all this knowledge, at the end of the day, it's going to be like a check and balance system for a lot of these things that we received as far as knowledge. And especially if we keep creating enemies for ourselves, then we have a tendency not to penetrate the knowledge. And I would say for sure that I'm one of the character, like, on the dimension that was the best at doing that. Meaning, when I came into my awakening, I felt everything around me was somehow cloaked in this nefarious plot to cause my doom. And I was right in many tenses, but I had the blame pointed in the wrong places. And that's, I guess another conversation, but people need to realize is that right now, after what has been discovered by, like I said, in the age of enlightenment, the enlightenment eras, the laws of light, okay, the power of light And this is, I'll condense this for people. See, what the power of light is the power that masters over fire. Okay? I'm going to try to explain this very easy. And it's because fire is actually a lesser form of light. Okay? So higher forms of fire is like lasers. That's why lasers even burn. They still burn, right? They burn a hole right through something fast. So these higher laws of light basically are the containers that the realm of fire sits in. So if you wanted to try to make this into a dogmatic speech, basically the angels would be, or what they know as the angles or the 7 angles of the prism, the angels would be light. And then the demons, who are known to be made of fire, just like you've seen them in the mythological lore, they live in hell, they live in fire. Those are the beings of the flame. Now, the characters of these two entities are exactly opposite. The lower realm or lower world life forms, this is physicality, the lower fire. This is what actually why our body is even hot. These entities have a dramatic lifestyle. They literally are kin to the dragon, like they call it the drama, which is cognate for the dragon mother, right? Even drugs, which is DRG, drugged, that's actually a Sumerian term that meant dragon. So, you know, and drugs definitely take you into different memories, and they take you into different levels of more of the life-based, drama-based experiences, okay? So that's the realm of fire. And then, as it states in the ancient books, in the flaming fires, they're constantly in these battles and everything, just like you see it in the books. So something must keep that in check and keep that in its boundary. Those are known as the laws of light or the powers of light. Now, some people are already trying to put characters behind this, like actual physical beings, but that's, again, a product of the physical realities in the realm of fire. The laws of light are like more or less, let me say, for instance, like what you see on the periodic table. They're chemical reactions. They don't actually think. They move in and they cause the boundaries and everything to be created and things to be in their proper category without even thinking about doing that. Here's an example of how the laws of light can be used by a person who knows about the laws of light but is still trying to use principles of the laws of light to master over people in the fire worlds. In this case, silicon and carbon. Now, if you look at the periodic table, you'll notice that silicon and carbon are right next to each other. And if you understand the periodic table, that's because that means that there's some kind of likeliness or similitude between silicon and carbon, silicon. So now a person who's trying to use this power of the laws of light can say, well, we see that carbon, now humans are carbon-based life forms, 666. We see that carbon has this affinity for silicon. How can we create things in the reality that people will gravitate to? Oh, let's create them from silicon. So, of course, the number one instrument around us, notice how this is happening after the Enlightenment era, the number one instrument around us, which is the cell phones and the computers, are infused with silicon. Right? So this is why we will have this relationship with these computers for quite some time now, because we already had a relationship with them on a chemical level. In addition to that, silicon is a silicate, and that also gives you silicone. Now, of course, you can see that even the female has now so close to the silicone is now inside of her body. So this is something that's taking place on the chemical level. So carbon-based life forms won't see that, well, the reason why we have computers around us is because the silicon inside the computer is always trying to make some kind of contact or try to understand us. And this is actually what you see in a laboratory. When you put a carbon molecule next to a silicon-based molecule, and then you look at them under a far infrared or, electron microscope, you will see the silicon attempt to try to interact with the carbon. So again, that's the laws of light. Those are higher laws. That's like the mechanics of how, quote unquote, the supreme being built the world. But because that knowledge is now in the hands of people that would just rather sell you a cell phone and just rather keep you right next to that thing and entrained with that thing, then that's how the laws of light are used by what we called as the princes of power. And the reason why they call them princes is because they know about this. Because the sheer ability just to know about what I'm talking to you about right now makes you a prince or a king. So this is because that's why this is known as basically this is the king's knowledge, because the king and the priest were actually the same thing in most ancient traditions. That there was no this person that just had divine right of lineage and then this other person who knew about spirituality. No, in all ancient cultures, that was married within the same being. And so having this knowledge, this is known as the knowledge of princes, the knowledge of kings. And then that knowledge, when you receive it, allows you to be aware of what most people can't see with their naked eye. But when you start becoming aware of how spirits move and, what is the games that they play, especially with energy, etc., then you can kind of suss them out, meaning you can kind of like start seeing it work a little bit more around you. And then you learn how not to do certain things like become agitated, anxiety, anger. Because when you get into those frequencies, because just as sure as we drink water and we eat food, gamma beings or infrared beings, because there's other spectrums, right, that we can't see with our eyes, the entities that live on that realm, then they eat that kind of energy. So infrared basically for us is anger and anxiety. So if we're easy to react, some entities will try to keep us constantly having anxiety and anger so that we're pushing off what looks like a cone from our body, which is basically the emissions from our emotions. And so that's, of course, stems into why a lot of people feel like there's a lot of nefarious spiritual activity going on in the reality, and the energy of the human beings are being drained. And that's just occurring because that's kind of like normal in a system with this many organisms. The only way that you would be able to prevent something like that is, first of all, to be aware that is going on, and then to stop reacting, right? And now this is interesting because when they talk about noble metals, so see, I'm still talking about the periodic table here. Noble metals, they don't really react. A lot of the other elements, all the other elements on the periodic table, they react. That's how they form their bonds and all the different drama that basically those elements go through. The noble metals and gases, they don't go through that because they don't react. So what's literally being said is that if you learn how to observe the reality, but you don't react, so you're storing up all your power, then this makes you a noble. And of course, that term noble is literally used for who? The powerful person that's in the land that has all the control. You see? So, yeah, I mean, this is what we're talking about.
I've got a quick question from the chat room.
Oh, there's a chat room.
Yeah. This gentleman, I imagine he must have heard this from some of the conspiracy-related stuff out there, but he's wondering if you happen to know anything about a reincarnation machine that keeps souls reincarnating on this earth.
Yeah, actually, it's not a machine in the traditional sense, like it has mechanical moving parts. What it is that it's very simple to explain. Okay, first of all, it's like this. So if you look at, so you're not the body. So what happens is that every single time that you get up every single day and you look into this mirror and you confirm to yourself that what you're seeing in the mirror is actually you become locked in time. You literally become locked in what people would say is the reincarnation process. And the reason why that's happening is because you're associating yourself with something physical that will decay. And you actually are not that. You're actually something that is immortal, that cannot decay. So you will, like a dream, continuously go back in and attempt to relive that same character over and over again. And this is within the Toltec knowledge. You can check out Sergio Magana for more of this knowledge, because what it also teaches is how to break that chain of time, how to basically break the spell of time. Because then what you do is you start to nullify your character. And through certain techniques, you can learn basically how to disappear your reflection in the mirror. And then as you keep going through that process, what it does is, in the easiest term to say is nullifying. You basically are cashing in this character. You're saying, okay, I know that this is basically falsehood. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to see what more I truly am. And then what happens is that you start then in this process dreaming in third person rather than first person. So this is more like a OBE, where you literally see your body operating and you're watching your body operating, right? So your dreams start coming out like that. Instead of you being in first person, like you're the person that's having the dream and you just assume that that's you, you all of a sudden start seeing the dream like you're having an OBE inside of the dream. And then what you'll notice, since you generally won't find mirrors in the dream, so you can see that that's not you most of the time, you'll notice that the character that would be perceived to be you is not you. Sometimes it's even a friend. Sometimes it's somebody that you don't necessarily know, etc. But you start to witness that basically there's this program running that you keep associating as yourself, and it's not really you. And then through this process, you learn different things because you're basically pulling out of the lower world, or which was known as the underworld, or the Mikla, which is basically all of your, what you feel like are your faults, what you feel like are your habits, what you feel like are your mistakes, and what you feel like are your drawbacks. That's actually what creates the underworld that your consciousness is in. So you literally start to nullify all that as basically not even being valid and important. Something else greater is now in front of you. And then you start to move into the higher worlds. And very rapidly, you then start to realize that Earth itself is actually on one of the lower cogs. So you can actually dream about Earth, or you can actually, which is going to happen on Earth the next day. You can dream about things that are going to happen for you the next day, and you can start moving further up the cog. And so, yeah, that's the best explanation that I can give to that person about, you know, what they feel like the reincarnation machine is, instead of seeing it as something that the government put there to keep us here. What it is actually something that is very ancient. It's been known about for thousands of years, and it ties directly into us thinking that we're actually these physical bodies. And then when the process of us leaving here starts to occur, we just immediately load ourselves back into those memories. And we can literally see those memories by their spikes. And the spikes are things that have happened to you in life that were like significant moments, maybe car crashes, maybe won the lottery, maybe the girlfriend broke up with you. In those moments, you have these emotional spikes. So generally, when you're about to leave here, you see all of your spikes. And that's why people say, oh, my life flashed before my eyes. People who have, gone to almost died and then they end up coming back. So they start seeing in their vibrational rhythm just the spikes, because those are the things that are those are like the strongest things on their mind. And then they try to grab those spikes, like they literally try to grab back into those moments, because basically what is behind them or around them is the chasm. And it's literally like a vacuum. So it feels like something is like trying to suck you into everything and nothing. And then in that point, a person can they're basically in fear. So they're trying to grab onto their old memories and their old data. I'm James. I used to live here. I have a wife. I have children. So they're trying to basically pull themselves back into the core of their reality. And many of them are successful in doing that. And we call that reincarnation. Now, when they come back, because like I said, what you're witnessing in the dream world is you have a lot of simultaneous what we will say simultaneous projections running. You'll go into one of your other projections, and then you go through that process of coming into realization again. So time is non-linear. So you'll actually even experience what you feel like is the birth process of you coming into that other person. But if you want to understand how this truly works, you have to see of how this is being done now. When you have what's called deja vu, that's generally you moving in from another part of the timeline into this reality, because this part of the reality, for some reason in that moment, that's the point where you now need to make a different decision. See, because the only thing that we would be doing, and when we're locked into those reincarnational loops, is trying to figure out different sequences to get us out of the loop. Like we would literally, and this is what's called a time lord, except for many people are not professional reincarnators. They don't know, like the llamas, that, hey, I'm coming back again. Now I'm going to try left instead of right, or I'm going to try to just do this life only knowledge, so that way that I can actually reach the top of Mount Meru, or, whatever the goal of the person that they feel like, okay, I need to go into this direction in order to become fully realize, like to go into full-on enlightenment, because there's so many levels still up from even just this reality. You can actually have a physical existence here and still be pursuing your journeys on to higher levels. Because that's actually what higher levels equal is more consciousness. That's why I said more, when more is given to you, more is required. So now you become more aware that, hey, I got this body. I got a few other bodies that are in these other kind of geometric worlds. So you literally start, and that's why they call it the son of darkness, is because we know so little about ourselves. We don't even know that we can even do this. Like, this sounds like one of the better sci-fi movies right now. You see what I mean? And this is also the big play in the program, is to keep writing the program so that we keep receiving the program and loading the program and never realizing that we're actually inside of a program construct, and we're taking data in like a computer. You know how somebody they have to program the computer. It needs to tell it what to do in order for it to do something. If the computer started doing stuff by itself, and they would call that artificial intelligence. So literally what's happening in our world is that human beings are now going to have to start making those journeys and making those trips into this unknown self of theirs by themselves. And this is the first time that, or not the first time, but this is for many the first time that they've started doing that.
Sevan, would you mind if I went ahead and opened up the phone lines? And
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So anybody, if you are ready to call in, if you had a question prepared for Sevan, feel free to call in at 209-348-9810. And just a warning to you, Sevan, while you're talking, we might have calls come in, so it might kind of cut you off a little bit. So just try to kind of remember where you left off.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, and while we're waiting for a call to come in, I did want to go ahead and ask you about Pizzagate. That's a buzzword that we're seeing quite a bit. What do you think of that? Is this something frivolous and stupid, or is this something that we should worry about spiritually?
Well, I guess that what happens is that the easiest way to explain this is the last thing that's actually for sale is real estate in people's mind. So, and what that is that if you notice how, especially with the advent of Donald Trump, that life has become a reality show. And this is because obviously Hollywood, since Ronald Reagan and even before that, has always sought to use the government. Okay. And the reason for that is because Hollywood is fake, right? They make movies.
Sorry about that. It just happened just now. We had a call come in. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, Sevan Bomar. I'm so happy to talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
No, I wish I could express to you how much I've learned from watching the videos. The etymology stuff is helped me so much. It's like I find myself breaking down every word all the time. But that's good because yes. There's several things. I'm nervous. That's so weird. Okay, there's several things that I wanted to tell you about, and I thought it'd be best to maybe spit them all out and then just let you answer it and get off the line. But one of them was the word alter, like to alter something and change it, and an alter like with magic. And so after I tell you everything, I would like to know about the Mandela effect. God, I'm nervous like I'm talking to a celebrity. Okay. The things that I wanted to tell you about is when around 2014, I was in the swimming pool, and this big ball, it was like 4.5 by 5 foot in diameter. It was like cream colored and peachy colored because there was a fire burning in the center. It came down, and it was right, I'd say within an arm and a half length from me, and it was hovering right in front of me. And everything was silent and quiet, and I was trying to scream for someone I wasn't afraid though, but I wanted someone to see it. And then all of a sudden I heard my daughter and her boyfriend, they had came home, and they had stopped in their tracks behind me. And I heard my little girl's voice, and she said, "Mom, I'm right behind you, and I see it too." Come to find out later on, she saw what I saw, and he only saw this orange ball way in the distance in a tree line. But what we saw was right there, and then it floated slowly up over our shed, and then it shot up into the sky and disappeared like an orange star. And then I started having all kind of weird things happen. Like I'd always been kind of a rock and roll girl, and I had Michael Jackson appeared by my bed one night, and he was like in a portal, and he said, "Come on, hurry up." And I'm like laying there like, oh my God. And he was so real. And then he said, "It's okay, you're not ready yet." And we started having all these Michael Jackson experiences happen. Like my phone, Twitter gave me a notification and said, "Michael Jackson and Ghost Adventures is now following you." Stuff like this. Well, I ended up finding out that it's been like this big puzzle. And I found out I had a lot of things in common with his person. But especially children, I started meditating against like child ritual sacrifice and stuff. And I had a meditation one night where Michael Jackson showed me this little girl, and I told my daughter later, it happened to be on the blood moon, 2015. I'd heard that the Pope was going to maybe sacrifice these kids, and I was trying to meditate against it. And anyway, so I see this little girl, and I'm telling Darby and Jeremy about it later, and she has a black boyfriend. So I said, "I think Michael Jackson was showing me my future grandchild." And bam, something popped in my head, and I felt something all around my head, and I knew it was a child that I had helped. That's how I really felt. Well, then this is the last part. I'm sorry to talk so long. But then the next thing that happened was one night I was sleeping, and I dreamed that I was taken into this like auditorium thing, and a lot of bad things happened to me. And there was like when I woke up, it was 4:55 a.m. and I knew I had time left to sleep. I went back to sleep, and then I was taken back there again, and they cut off all my hair and changed it to dark brown. It was all messed up. Well, I know I sound crazy, but I get to work and I'm checking my email, and at 4:55 a.m. I got an email from someone named Puff the Magic Dragon, and they had just messaged me and said skull cap with a question mark. And then what happened was we went to the website I went to the thing, and it changed them back to ambiguous user was their actual name. But at first I saw they had Alice in Wonderland laying in bed and a white rabbit looking down over her. My daughter saw it, but then they changed it and took it off. And the two videos that are there now are real nefarious looking, and they have like 666 in the Tylenol. But I decided to not take it as something scary and take it as confirmation that maybe I was helping. And so without you forgetting my question about the Mandela effect, I'm going to let you go and see if you can get anything from all that and maybe give me an answer, because you're the person that I've been wanting to tell about this. So I'm going to just listen now, okay? And thank you for everything.
Okay, you're more than welcome. What I would say is that, actually, this is actually very relevant to the Mandela effect in the sense there's a recent recording that I just put out. It's called What is the Matrix? And in that, I dissect completely how programming works and what are the cognates of how programming works in the reality in order to make the connection. And the reason why I do this is to not only reveal our ability to program, but also to reveal the identity of the programmers that are programming in this reality. And then also, more than anything, letting us see how far this can actually go. Like, we literally create the step before it appears. Like, we have this power. And the more that, because how this power works also is works very strongly on faith. So the more we see ourselves doing it, the easier it makes it for us to do again. But what happens if we start to manifest the things that we don't want? Like, this is actually, even if you start seeing in, let's say, DMT experiences and those kind of things, like once you start getting into the fear factor, you start to literally create all these different things and, all these different, it could get wild in there. That's all I want to say. And this is being directly generated from the consciousness. So just like in the dream where you can literally see cracks in the sidewalk and moss growing and, have triple rainbows in the sky and all these different things that you can create in there, so too we can also begin to birth things in the reality. So the main thing is that to notice that you have this power and ability to make things very, very solid, and even to a point where they're beginning to bleed, as we call it, into the reality. But then start to take a moment to think about, like, since you have children, utilizing your ability to begin to project a world that you can begin to share with your child and share with your family with these powers. And I would really recommend, again, that you check out Sergio Magaña's work about Toltec dreaming and controlling your dream, because, you're already showing and listening that you can really, really get the dream world working to a point where you're beginning to physically manifest things. And then now you just want to immediately take the will of that instead of allowing it to kind of show you, which is what's mentioned as, like, sometimes the mirror can try to tell you what to do, but you need to always be in control and tell the mirror what to do. And in this sense, it's that thing to where you would need to start utilizing these powers to get yourself much more further along than in this reality. So there's no contrast to this. In addition, also remember that dreams are coded. So sometimes what Michael Jackson's are in coding is, well, if you like Mike a lot, if you can really idolize Mike, it generally is an emulation of your own oversoul. So it's literally you on a higher level trying to communicate with you. And then it will actually come in the form of something that you would revere, since you showing up to you would be a little bit strange, like just the human you showing up to you as a human. The program wouldn't actually be able to, the language wouldn't even be able to tell you what it really is trying to say. And so just remember that we associate things in our dreams a strange way, because sometimes we have names for things that are trying to show us the same thing in the dream, but it's like a different image. I'm not sure if I'm doing a great job of explaining that, but basically, like, if it's trying to say this guy Tom tomorrow that you're going to meet is the key to, you getting to another level, you may see this other Tom in the dream, and you may be going to another level with this Tom in the dream, and then you wake up, you're like, man, I got to call Tom. And then you see what I mean? So your mind only has one Tom to try to associate what you're seeing in the dream to you. So this is why getting more in control of the dreams and actually learning more about your own personal language that you're speaking to yourself is the key to utilizing that power and not allowing it to just, because remember, it's very creative. It's an imagination. So it can create an entire world. That's literally what that word is saying. So that's the pointers that I would give on that. And then in relation to the Mandela effect, it's once again a realization of that the minds control things. So let's say, for instance, if you have 8 billion people in the world, and we're just using rough numbers here, and 4 billion of these people are starting to misconstrue certain things that have taken place in the reality, then all of a sudden those things will actually take place like they used to. They'll become less static, and they'll actually change. And then people who are already on their own sound realization of what occurred will say, well, wait a minute, that change didn't happen. And if you notice, actually, the more because if you're a stickler for detail, you'll even see this kind of thing happening in the direct reality. Like, I've seen certain signs that said certain things. The next time I rolled by there in 5 or 10 minutes didn't say the same thing. And it's only if you're kind of monitoring that. But the reason why that can occur is because it is a mainframe. And once we know that, like I would literally say to everyone, is that don't look at this like a computer program like these cheap computers we're using in front of us. This is wet work. It's organic. But it's nature that is spitting out that code. And there again, there are many different things to interact with and many different life forms, but the most important one is you. So we can't get caught up in too much of looking, let's say, at the screen, because that's what the dream is like. We have to become the actor. We have to actually become the director, of the entire thing. And so just keep going and pushing yourself further. Like I said, check out some of those works to really get a handle on that ability, so that way you can utilize it to project you and your family further.
Awesome. Now, I did want to ask you about reptilians. Are there really negative reptilians out there trying to suppress our spirituality, or are these beings just getting a bad rap?
I would definitely say that I always have this saying, and everyone hears me say it, to say that every reptilian is bad is just as silly as saying every human is good. You will have across species, like if you look up Nagaraja, you'll have across species different types of what would appear to be to us serpentine life forms. Even energy is moves in a serpentine fashion. So, like our word S is the movement of that serpentine fashion. Our letter E, which gives us the beginning of energy, is a movement again of that serpentine fashion. So what I would say to people is to understand that we're like chimeras ourselves. A large part of the DNA within our body is reptilian, and there's a large amount of different types of mammalian DNA, insectoid DNA. So we're basically a hodgepodge of all of, or a large amount of life forms. And then you also have those life forms that they exist in their purest form. So like they have their own before the mixed happened, just like you have some people that are predominantly one race, right? And then you have people who have been mixed and now they're like half that race, half another race. So the same thing happens with many of the, let's say, the serpent families that in most cases don't actually live on the physical plane. Because at the end of the day, let's say, for instance, we can conceive how large dinosaurs are, maybe. Then maybe we should ask ourselves, well, how large is a dinosaur spirit, though? Are we just to assume that dinosaurs don't have spirits? And then when they die, where does that spirit go? Does it roam like many of the human spirits do when they don't leave the bubble? So I would say for sure that just by nature, many of the reptiles are rather hostile. Like they're literally more locked into the reptilian side of their existence. And so I would suppose that if you ever met one of those on the spiritual plane, different ones may be somewhat hostile. However, there seems to be this major connection with this same kind of serpentine form getting as vast as being planet size in its consciousness to a point where it has not only a level of sentience, but actually serves a purpose as being a sheath, which is basically a shield around the planet in order to keep it from being interacted with from most of the things that are on the outside of the planet that will prevent its growth. So in a nutshell, if there was an outside of the bubble, the ancestors solved what was encasing the outside as a serpent, and that we were actually all inside of it, and that in their terms, it was basically our mother, father. It was what was assigned to protect us. And that when we then can move forth from it, which as you can see in some of these Messiah paintings where you see the Messiahs coming out of the mouth of the snake. So once you become enlightened, you're literally birthed from the mouth of the snake, which the ancients have a different way of putting everything. They zoomorphi everything and find its nature correspondence. So that's how that was all put together. And so that's what you're dealing with. So you do have definitely some people, some genus, haplogroups. That's basically racial grouping. So you have some haplogroups that actually have more of the reptilian nature within their genetics, and they have a tendency to be a lot more callous and cold-blooded. But many of them are still in actual mammalian form, so they're in human bodies. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that person with those reptile traits is actually looking like a reptile. And then when you start really switching up frequencies, because we have to realize that there's a lot about the planet that is governed by frequencies, you'll find, especially in the nether regions, that there are a lot of serpentine families, such as Vasuki, which is read about in the Hindu traditions. And then as you start going up into more in the atmosphere, and again, this all has to do more with just the whole link of time, then you'll find more bird-like aerial type entities. And then when we look into what would be evolution, snakes turn into birds, right? So you can read that on Wikipedia. Like obviously the closest reptile to the chicken is the Tyrannosaurus. All birds that we're seeing actually were snakes at some point in time. So this just once again shows you again, Ouroboros, how there's a connection between the head and the tail, and that entire ecosystem, which you could see it as, has all been put together in order to allow this reality to even be here. So whatever designed it, designed every single small little piece from start to finish. So that's what you're dealing with. So there's a start to finish to the genus. One end is the bird, the other end is the snake.
We talked about this just a little bit, or you talked about it actually. Psychedelic drugs. Is it safe for me to use these tools, or is it even recommended for my spirituality?
Well, what I wouldn't recommend is somebody recommending psychedelic drugs to another person. And that's just so you don't have to like take the blame for if it doesn't go right. But seriously, there's many enhancing elements that are out here. But a person that, they have to calibrate themselves properly. I mean, that would be the advice. Now, many people have just jumped right into certain things and, they've had experiences and they've grown from those experiences. And that's generally like neophyte behavior, just to jump into something and to not know exactly what's going to happen. And then, to take in that experience and be like, okay, wow, that was incredible, or that was scary. But, as an adept, you want to look at all experiences and study things more and to understand, like, how does that fit into your spiritual process? I would tell people personally to learn about breathing first, because in many cases you can get pretty high off of just breath alone. And also breathing is very important when you start utilizing certain elements, especially, to learn how to move the energy and how far the energy can really go. So these plants are masters themselves, like they are actually really sentient. That's the only way they can cause this kind of phenomena. They have a large amount of energy. They're what they call bioenergetics, right? So that liquid, those fluids, those chemicals are highly charged. Also, the networking system of many of these elements connects a lot with the root systems that move through the planet. Like obviously ayahuasca is a vine, and the trees that are connected with it, the root system connects through the entire planet. So it has a lot of access, but many times that can be utterly overwhelming for a person who's still just trying to figure out who they are. So I would say that, yeah, you start tweaking your body first. And that way, when you do start going on these experiences, especially if you're utilizing the breathing, it's just like an aha moment to some of the things that you're already experiencing. And then you're also already equipped to learn how to not just become dependent on some kind of element to get you to another level. But generally, again, that doesn't happen either, because most of these elements are not very addictive. Like most people don't leave a DMT or ayahuasca ceremony and like, okay, we're going to do it tomorrow. It's not like weed, you know what I mean, where, you want to go smoke again. It's kind of like, okay, well, let me let that sit in for a while. And then you may even find yourself 3-4 months later, not exactly that encouraged to go jump back in on another journey. So I would just say to people it's 2017. Like if you're looking for a breakthrough, sometimes you have to utilize what's around you and what's been made available to cause those breakthroughs, especially if you need more energetic potential, because the more that the body gets callous, cold, rigid, brittle, and stuck in its ways, the more vibration that's needed to kind of shake the old foundations of things and to break those foundations so that you can get some new growth. So many of the substances have a way of taking a person that may be a little bit more, crusty in their change, I would say, from that state to becoming more flexible in the realization that there is some stuff going on out here that they should be paying attention to, and that they are Lord and master of their own life, and that they have sole responsibility to understand the destination of their spirit on all of its movements throughout the cosmos. So that's what we're talking about.
What are your thoughts on Jesus himself? Was he a real person, and are his teachings important and integral to what's going on right now?
Well, that's a very interesting question. When I look at things as far as on a religious level or as steps on the ladder, as long as you don't stop then you'll get somewhere. So a lot of these things are wholesome principles that anyone should follow. And you find a lot of those things written in the spiritual texts, Psalms, Proverbs. These are, wise sayings. There's been wise sayings since the beginning of time. What I do know for sure, however, is that there's an extreme agenda around the Christian faith, just in relation to energy management systems, meaning utilizing people's energy to power other things, projections. And I find that the Christian faith is many times tied into that. Now, whether Jesus actually walked or not, I guess what people will have to realize is that there were several messianic characters throughout history, not just the 13 crucified saviors or whatever they talk about in Zeitgeist, but many individuals that literally walked a path of going from the process of basically a regular person to total realization. Now, if that person said that they were the only one and the begotten and all that kind of stuff, then that means they must have been ignorant to many of the old laws, because before these stories came up, there were much more ancient versions. And most of these stories are plagiarized from those versions. And also they have a lot of inaccuracies. And the reason for this is also you have to realize when you're developing a nation, like the people who are responsible for developing nations know the key components to developing those nations. And in many cases, they learn those components from nations that are either still here or have crumbled. And one of the major things that you have to add when you're building a nation is to have a religion. So in the United States, when they were concocting their version of the religion, they decided to go with the Brahmin and Saraswati story, which is what we call the Abrahamic tradition, him and his wife Sarah. And then they threw in a bit of the Kemetic tradition with the Horus god and his mother Ma'at and sitting on the lap in their father Ra. And they decided to mix in some things. But then remember that this religion went out to mostly slaves. So it could not be, let's say, for instance, if you look at the Kemetan tradition, all of the entities from the Kemetan pantheon are actually melanin dominant or black. So you can't actually make, let's say in the United States, you can't make the God that everyone's supposed to be worshiping black if you're going to give that same religion to the slaves that need to do the working. Because if they keep looking at this God that's the same color as them, they're going to start asking, why am I actually doing this work? It's just a psychological thing. So religions are often used to oppress groups of people. So in addition to that, you also find that in any culture, let's say the Greeks took the entire Egyptian tradition and stylized it verbatim pretty much as far as their gods. But the reason why they didn't make them Egyptians is because it was for the Greeks. You see, so what religions are they're more or less necessary components to societies. They generally tell core stories that are found within the stars and passed on by the elders. And generally the characters are stylized as close as possible to the populace or the groups of people that it's being given to. So that way they feel some closer kinship to it. So, did Jesus the Christ actually exist? I don't believe so. Did John the Baptist actually exist? Yes, I do believe so. And what we find in meaning also as John the Baptist as several different characters and a part of a much more deeper rooted tradition, which actually connects in with Gnosticism. It even connects in with the Knights Templar. It even connects in with Baphomet and Baphometism or baptism. Okay. So that tradition would be more able to trace, it'd be more easier to trace an actual, a real live person that was involved in that, because you even start getting more into Pythagoras at a certain point and people that actually have recorded accounts in history. So the Jesus story is more or less a segue from those traditions in order to kind of create something a bit new, but not so new, if you know what I mean.
My next question has to do with love and romance. Is there such thing as a twin soul or star-crossed lovers?
Well, in a system that's binary, since this is a binary star, everyone here would have opposite. So how this kind of works is that it's basically your shadow, or what's on the other side of the mirror is your twin flame. And the moment that you unite is the moment that you actually activate. So in the Toltec tradition, it's the tono and the noggle. The moment that they unite, that's like night and day, or the sun and the moon. The moment that they come together, that's when you have all your power, because there's no longer like something obscure to you or where you only have half of your power. So in every tradition, there's a story about this. And so the externalized sun, the son of the light, which we're kind of done with, has everyone looking for this person externally. But how you truly find this person, because there is always a physical correspondence to everything that we're doing, is you will first have to find that being within. So once you find that being within, then you have now enacted the process of birthing that person into the physical reality, if that's what you choose, if that's your kick. Like for most people that get to that level, they realize the power in keeping things internally of that nature and not allowing that to just become an external pursuit. And let me explain why. What happens is that, let's say, for instance, at a certain point, especially on the path, you're going to need to learn how to motivate yourself, right? Because if you're not self-motivated, and then you're seeing all this stuff going around you, all this negativity, quote unquote, and then you get a couple bad comments on YouTube, which we all get, especially if we're delivering some powerful message.
Oh, yeah.
That could pretty much push you out of this whole thing, because then you'll start asking yourself the question, like, why am I even doing this anyway? And so, of course, if everything then is tearing you down and you don't have a way of motivating yourself, you're out for the count. So the same thing is with this whole twin flame thing, that if you don't really know how to turn yourself on, then you can't stimulate yourself. So that way you can't really unlock your whole passion power. And that's what kind of kicks off the juices within you in order to allow you to basically become erect in the reality, to where the reality actually turns you on. Your life and your existence turns you on. And then now you're in this love scenario with your life and who you are. So obviously back in the day, that was like the first thing, is that you were taught to how to love yourself and how to, realize how much had been put into your existence, like your gifts, right? Just those hands, those legs, right? So what happens though is that we're in this reality again that wants to devalue the things that are most important to us, and then wants to give value to the things that basically are not even, they have no real bearing for us, right? So if you then like come unbalanced like that, if you start valuing the world more than yourself, then you actually kind of lose sight that this is actually the truth. The truth is that you're this all-powerful being, and you have been taken into a spell. And spells are words, they're tones, they're vibrations. And never was words used like we're using them right now. Like this whole conversation things, like there's like a million pointless words in English. All the words that are from the ancient culture, when you speak them, they do things. And again, that's again that whole thing with, hey, I create as I speak, which is abracadabra. I create as I speak, as Raz Ka. So basically, Raz Ka is basically saying the soul of the sun. Right? So that's Raz Ka, abracadabra. So it's the son of the soul. Excuse me, it's a tongue twister. The soul's emissions, or the sun's emissions, are actually creating as they emit. So this is how you should be. You should be, as you're saying things, it should be formulating things into manifestation. But if we're constantly using the words in our emissions for, I don't know, maybe I should go get a cheeseburger today, none of this has any, it creates, like the magic happens, you go and get the cheeseburger, but it's not of some kind of massive magnitude that's going to change your entire existence. So again, the wording is key to understanding, the programming in itself.
Okay, and on the topic of psychic abilities, do we have them? Do you believe that they even exist?
Yeah, what happens is that the more you become conductive, as we talked about earlier, like most people's bodies highly acidic, and a lot of the glands are calcified. Like we know the pineal gland is calcified, but there's other glands like the thymus and these different glands that are not functioning properly on most people. And it's just because obviously the food that's being eaten and the water that's being drank is really high in minerals that are not really good for the body in complete profile. So what happens is as the alkalinity starts to go down, a person becomes more acidic, these areas, and also even if they're not even used, that's generally the biggest degradator of, or the thing that causes them to mess up the most is not using them. So if you're not using these kinetic abilities, they go dormant. So we for sure have them, and the way that they're unlocked is when we pump more energetic potential into our body, then the chakras have the fuel potential to basically come online. So generally the chakras, they oscillate, right? But they're moving really sluggishly. And this is generally because when certain things start happening to you during the process of your chakras, like whatever happens to you between the age of 1 to 7, gets sealed in the root chakra. So if something crazy happens during that time, then that's kind of the foundation that you're standing on until you go back in there and you start, clarifying and nullifying and pulling your energy out of things that have happened during that time. And so with that being said, when you get your system functioning properly, then it powers up, and then those abilities, which are really more known as the siddhas, that's siddhas, those are the powers. Those powers actually begin to turn on, and you can read about those powers online by utilizing that keyword.
And what are your thoughts on this thing known as black magic?
Well, it's a very interesting term because, obviously there's this whole program running that everything that's black we're supposed to be afraid of. And that just goes all across the board. And that's done for a reason, because it's actually done to keep us out of realizing the knowledge about ourselves, keeping us from looking deep within, because when you close your eyes, you see blackness. So the term black magic as it's used today actually relates more to what you see going on in traditions like the OTO and the Golden Dawn and Crowleyism, which actually comes more from the white lodges, or what's known as the Great White Brotherhood, more so than it comes from anything termed something like the Black Brotherhood that would be doing black magic or something like that. And all this term, because it's then a term that's being used that is not even defined correctly. But then this term black magic actually means the use of magic in a way to hinder others. And so that would give us more of the term, let's say, sorcery, which is again to use magic to fool others. And again, this magic has actually to do more with people who understand a little bit more about the mechanics of the reality, like hidden mechanics. Like there's certain smells that attract certain things that you can't see. And it's just because smell is so strong, then it serves as a great resonator for certain things, certain kinds of energies. So in certain tenses, if you knew that already, it couldn't even be labeled as something like magic. You would literally need everyone else not to be aware of it. So I guess, again, the term black magic as it's used today is actually someone who's utilizing these kind of magical principles and properties to get over on other people for some kind of benefit.
Okay. And I do want to touch on this because you did bring up this person at the beginning of our interview, Donald Trump. What do you think of Donald Trump? Is he good? Is he bad? Where does he fit into all of this?
Well, it's actually a whole part of the prophecy. See, the thing is that people have to be aware that since we're creating all of the reality collectively, then what the prophecies are designed for is they're actually the programs, they're the checkpoints in the program. And so there's these prophecies about basically this final trumpet, which is basically Donald Trump, which is basically the final trumpet to blow on the earth. And then, all these different crazy things they say are happening, but it's actually just metaphors for basically the decay of the whole externalized side of the reality, because the mother of all these prophecies is basically the 2012 prophecy. In the 2012 prophecy, it dictates how there will be earthquakes and these different kind of things, and not earthquakes and famines. Okay, so when someone's trying to interpret that externally, they're basically trying to move to Ecuador or move someplace where there's a lot of food so they can escape this torrential chaos that if it ever happened at the magnitude of what they're saying, then there would be no place that would be safe, especially no place that a person who's been staying in the city all their lives could live. So the truth is actually the earthquake is when you're getting rid of an old lifestyle and an old way of being. And the famine is when you start starving that old way of being until it just completely dies because you're not even doing that anymore. Now you're no longer in service to the external and you're putting all your power in internally. So you see how the master can always take any spell and work it in their favor. So meaning the master can take any words in any situation and work it in their favor. So when I see a Donald Trump coming, the only thing that I can see is that, well, it's definitely an indicator of being a time for us to move closer to sovereignty. And of course, sovereignty is where the system is not having power over you. Now, power is just your lights and your water. So for people, I think if they want to use the Donald Trump advent in a positive way, because anything can be used in a positive way or a negative way, then they would see this as, okay, these fools have really lost their mind with this kind of craziness of reality. And as I told you in the beginning, the goal was to marry Hollywood with Washington over a period of time. But the play is you need a Hollywood and you need a Washington at first. You need this place to where their craziest things can be shown, the most daunting things can be said, but they all can be done and they can continue because it's not real anyway. And this is Hollywood. And then you got to have this other place that's really real, like all the laws and all the rules and all the stuff that you're really supposed to do is all generated from that place. And that's, of course, government, politics, Washington. So obviously Hollywood and the government are both being run by the same group. So in the end of their whole cycle, they would come together, like church and state coming together. And so we're literally seeing where, because the whole goal is that some people don't really watch TV. They don't get into the whole fictional side of the reality, but they look at politics because politics determine what's going to go on with them, laws, even about their money and that kind of stuff. And then you got this other group of people that don't even pay attention to politics at all, but they love TV and they just watch TV and they watch all the programs and all that kind of stuff because after all, in their mind, they can't do anything about what the politics want to do anyway because it's all rigged. The whole damn thing is rigged. So at the end of the day, what happens is that now when both are together, it's because they want to buy more real estate in everyone's mind. Instead of having these two forces that still divide the consciousness of most people, they bring both of those forces together. So now people that didn't watch TV or really get into news and all that kind of stuff before, now they're watching it because they're literally trying to see what Donald Trump is going to do the next day, like a reality show. And then the people who are watching politics, they're scared as shit because they don't know what this guy is going to do next. So they're watching it every day. And then the oligarch, that old juggernaut, is capable now of actually harvesting all of the minds, like individual processors, literally all of the mind, because they're all processing thoughts about that same resonant frequency. It's able then to use all those processors to actually solidify more of the events that are going to take place in the future. Now, these events, for people who are really afraid of things all the time, have nothing to do with the overall desolation of the entire population. Actually, it would be more towards the opposite. You have to realize that the reality is governing itself on energy. So the last thing it wants to do is get rid of all the energy generators, but it will love to keep all those energy generators, especially as they keep populating, afraid and scared to death. Like basically not knowing if they're going to basically even be able to make it for the next day, if they should pull their money out of their bank, whatever. And so what happens with this whole kind of scenario is people should realize that the heat basically is being turned up on humanity. And if you become very moved by these things that are happening with Trump and all of that, then now you're basically paying more attention to them and paying all the time during the greatest moment of your life to begin to experience more of yourself. You're actually looking at this dude that is just like a whole joke to begin with. So that's what's going on with Donald Trump.
This is something that is a little bit of a personal question because I've been having trouble with it. should I quit eating meat? Is it going to help me progress faster if I stop eating meat? Because I'm having a really tough time quitting meat.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult for many people. And the reason is that I would say it like this. What happens is that a while ago, I just have to say that I've been a vegetarian for 13, 14 years now, something like that. And I literally quit cold turkey. That's always my joke. And and the reason was because somebody told me that it was decaying, and I was like, they were like, "Hey, why would you eat that? It's decaying." And I was like, "Huh?" And they were like, "Yeah, like if you don't eat meat, like maybe within the first 5 minutes of when you kill it, like it goes into this decay process." And they were like, and it doesn't even really look like what you're seeing it as now. Like that's just after they pump it up with all these different things to make it look like something that you would buy. So I went and did my own research, and I found that was true. And then on top of that, after a while, after watching something like Food Incorporated, I realized that even if I was going to eat this stuff, I don't want to necessarily eat this one, like meaning the quality of the cows and the quality of these animals that are coming out right now because they have to be mass produced is like really bad. Like, and so putting that inside of your body, all the pus, all the hormones and those kind of things just basically create a chemical nightmare. But here's what I see on the metaphysical level, because I have to like go from all angles to make a determination about what I'm going to do. What happens in life is that sometimes you could kind of get into this like cycle, like what we talked about. It's like you can't seem to get to your next stage. And what this generally is related to is the oscillation, the actual vibratory movement of your body. So what happens is that generally like certain areas such as your colon and the intestines, these areas get so lodged with plaque, mucoid plaque, which is basically what happens when this meat is broken down. It just sticks to the walls of your organs. So then what happens, since these organs, literally why they call them organs, are supposed to play, they're supposed to vibrate in order to keep the chakras in harmony, they basically can't vibrate, and this takes down the energetic field. And then since your currency is your current in your body, meaning your money, your actual even physical money, and the reality is actually connected to how much money, energy is moving through your body, how much spirit and soul is moving through your body. What literally happens is you may even start experiencing issues with finances and resource-based issues. So if you kind of had, because a lot of people, they've had a lifestyle of that, they've still never gotten rich yet. It's been like years and years. And I won't say rich like, hey, I want to get money, but rich like, hey, I need to become a sovereign. You're going to have to actually buy your own water pumping system. You got to buy your own land. That's what you need this money for. So the truth is that if you're looking like to get to the next level, it's almost like watching a Star Wars movie when they're just going to go ahead and drop everything out of the cargo hangar and every single thing else and put all power into engines and hit the thrusters. That's what literally would getting rid of meat out of the diet, at least for a while, would do. It would basically allow you to drop the energetic lag that comes along with eating plasma, because plasma is a very toxic energetic form. And if we just understand it, you got animals, which are pretty much the most toxic. Then you have plants, they're less toxic. Then you have things like minerals, less toxic, water, less toxic, air, less toxic. Now, all those can be toxified and all those can be purified, but it's harder to purify animals. It's still hard to purify plants, but it's easier to purify more plants than animals. You got like organic plants, things, et cetera, et cetera. But then when you go into metals, right, they're already almost pure, but you can refine them even further. So what you should look at your body as then is this vessel that is basically taking energy in, and the kind of energy that you're putting right there, just like they say you are what you eat, is going to pretty much determine whether you have enough fuel to power this projection. So if you have this huge projection, you ain't going to be able to do that projection on chicken grease. You're literally going to have to go into more of your alkaloids and into more of your noble metals like colloidal silvers, colloidal gold, colloidal copper. Like those things repair your neurological system. And all this is doing is it's repairing the fibers in your system in order to allow the things to connect so you have conductivity. So you have this full manifestation, because what you're attempting to accomplish needs to move through at least 3, 4 of your major chakra centers before it comes out into this reality as something tangible that you can actually benefit from. So that's the benefit, I would say, of eating meat. So for those who don't want to go the whole humanitarian route, they should just think about, well, am I getting to where I want to get in life fast enough? And if I want to cut down the time, then I just need to drop this weight.
What about the Archons? Are they some sort of artificial intelligence?
The Archons are the same as what we were talking about as the primordial forms that make up the foundations of the reality. The Archons or the arcs are in themselves, they're basically like you see an arc in a rainbow. So the colors in the rainbow were actually cognates of the Archons. And it's because the Archons, which are known as the fallen angels, because they actually came down into matter, is really more, again, of a chemical process of light descending into becoming fire and then into becoming flesh. And then the agreement that was made, again, was all of those archons or that arc or that rainbow or those 7 chakras or those 7 colors make up the energy system that we call the body and the awareness that we're utilizing and harnessing within this reality. So, of course, the archons are going to get one of those nefarious bags, and it's just because even the darker sides of the reality, which we would call nighttime, wolves, owls snatching things up, and all of that part of the reality, which people don't really agree with, but still has to go on, is also making up a part of those energetic spectrums. So the world has very dangerous things in it, such as uranium, etc. Like you can't just run out at night in certain areas in the jungle and not expect for an onslaught or something like that to tear into your flesh. So there's basically this side of the reality that for people, it feels hostile to them. And because, again, that the Archons, out of ill definition, meaning people not understanding the complete components themselves of them, it started getting a very bad rap. And I'm not saying I'm advocating the idea of Archons, because now Archons have become something else, meaning that they're no longer this 7 colors in a rainbow that make that light, when light is shined into, they become 7 colors, those 7 colors, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's not how people have interpreted it now. Now people have interpreted the Archons as these nefarious beings who are basically running the entire reality and that the Illuminati worship. And that's just a corruption of the knowledge. But when you get thousands of people starting to believe that that is now the new identity of that word or that world, then it starts to change. You see? So this is what adaptation is about. You have to be able to say, well, I know the old story, but I wasn't worshiping the Archons anyway. I know what their role is and their place is in the reality, so I won't load the misconceptions. But at the same time, I won't go forward and say to everyone, oh, you should believe in the Archons. They're really the foundation of the reality. And back in the day, they were, you see what I mean? That's not my role. But just so you understand that the Archons are basically the components of the framework that we're existing in now, called the physical reality.
But you are, in a way, you're kind of confirming this idea that these Illuminati, these elite bloodlines, that they do have some kind of connection to a higher negative spiritual force or hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, they do have. Many of them do have connection, but it doesn't mean it's higher. See, when you're low, anything can become high. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. Like, human beings have been debased. So, I mean, if they knew who they truly were, like, much of this stuff is light work. I don't know if we could put it that way, but basically it's nothing for us to deal with these kind of life forms when they start becoming distorted. But if we're distorted ourselves, then it would have this appearance that whatever they're dealing with is so much more higher. But we haven't even actually seen higher yet, because this stuff that they're dealing with, just so you understand, it comes actually more from the Persian lore, and was carried into the U.S. generally through the connections that Shriners and Freemasons had made with many of the Arab countries. And in the Arab countries, there was literally a lot of magic going on, especially with the language and the calling forth of jinn, which were basically entities that roam throughout the desert, which were known as the genies. So these kind of life forms basically are from who knows what segments in time, maybe rather recent, maybe far back. It could be different identities. It's just the use of a disincarnate form, which means a form that doesn't have an actual physical body to do one's bidding. And so, of course, something like that can become a formidable opponent for someone who seeing is believing, because most people can't even see these life forms and them carrying on and doing things. So it's just basically what these organizations have done is they've enlisted some invisible forces that are not invisible to everyone, or not everyone is not, most people are not aware of them, but that doesn't go across the board. Many cultures are still aware that there are other life forms that exist. So their most powerful thing is basically mind control. It's storytelling. It's, the Pope and the Papists, they make paper. So money is their power. Talismans were, the beginning of really their power, because talismans are actually how many of these entities are called forth. And it's just basically what you're doing is you're concentrating an idea. It doesn't mean that this is necessarily a being sitting somewhere waiting for you to call it. What it is when you infuse all your power or your will inside of something, even if it's of nefarious intentions, you're going to begin to manifest something that can work on your behalf. And they call that an eidolon. So if you get hundreds of men utilizing a certain symbol or utilizing a certain name and driving an idea and a ritual and a power into that name, eventually that name becomes animate by itself, and it can be called upon to do certain things. And so when even these names are being constructed, they're put around certain things. Like if it's to fly, then there must be elements of flight around it. And then again, all you're seeing is you're seeing the process of a birthing, just like what you would see in a womb, but it's being done onto something. Do you see what I mean? It's like, again, until you know your power, none of this really makes sense. When you know your power, you know that basically if you sit there and you say something all night, something's going to happen. Like if you just believe something, like, and you got 5-10 guys and they all believe in it, and they just keep saying it and saying it and saying it, they just drive themselves into a fury, maybe drink some alcohol. Eventually, whatever it is that you're trying to get accomplished, you're going to start seeing a form of it being accomplished, right? So this is actually what magic exists with. Think about Harry Potter and how you see some of these magicians. They're basically conjuring from their will. What they're creating, the entity itself, didn't really exist before they actually bought it within their will. So that power, which is talked about in most of the ancient texts, is actually being utilized now for certain organizations to create invisible forms, ideas that start to control other people, how they feel, what they believe, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I want to make it for most people as simple as possible to understand that. See, how we're starting to view this is that, again, that there's literally some creature sitting somewhere waiting to be summoned. And truthfully, what it is it's being summoned from the minds of the inhabitants of the planet. And it births itself right from there. As far as if it had life before we gave life to it, it's just like, it doesn't work like that. So our minds right now are constantly evolving, and we're creating things with our minds that other people know how to harness. So even when we start coming into this belief about these aliens and all that kind of stuff, now, of course, there are other life forms out there, but now we're starting to get specific. We're starting to show specific geometry that this alien's supposed to have. And stuff is fed into the system, and then next thing you know, they're harnessing another kind of life form with that kind of power that we've given it. And it's just such a foreign way to think about how things work, but it actually answers the deepest questions about how realities are actually created. And then even more importantly, how did you get here? You see, so when you start crunching those kind of questions like, well, how am I in the mix of all of this? Then you can start realizing more and more about this power that we have to begin to manifest things from scratch.
Now, Sevan, just to kind of round things off and bring some finality to this awesome discussion, how do you feel about the future? Is the human race headed in the right direction, or are we truly headed for the end of days?
The right direction, look at the term. Right is literally a specific direction. So what happens is that the more and more it becomes apparent to us as a species that our language is actually controlling every single thing that's happening, the more and more we stand a chance at beginning to create a reality that we're back in control. And this will be by learning our own language, which will be revealed to us within our dreams, when we start getting control of our dreams. And I believe personally that humanity is not doing bad and they're not doing good, that things are going exactly as planned as far as the plan that we've all co-created together. If we understand truly that they're without contrast, then there can't be awareness of other things, meaning so without night, then there's no day, without good, there's no evil, and if that's exactly how we process the reality, then we'll see actually some of the people that are, let's say, the baddest people in the reality is actually being the most disadvantaged in the reality because they actually believe that what they're doing is even real. And the more crazy stuff they do, the more they start to believe that their life in this is actually real. While the people who are actually experiencing what they're doing are starting to go to another sanctuary within themselves to realize that they don't have to always be subject to the madness, external madness of others, and that they actually contain a kingdom of heaven within. And they will work more to actually get to that one, the more that the external one becomes less appealing. So this literally means that the crazier things would get in the reality, the more it will promote people to go within eventually. So either way, we win. So if it's the end, that means we're looking at the beginning. So I would just encourage everyone to look at the continuum of this, to realize that right now there's power. It's always been power. You're sitting in it. You are it. It's ready for you to completely unfold and develop it. But at the same time, it's still up to you. And that's, the ultimate power is that you get a chance to choose when you're going to awake in this dream. And I feel like that a lot of times this could be like a Freddy Krueger movie where they tell you don't fall asleep, because a lot of times people have a tendency to fall back asleep. But I believe that the knowledge that we're getting now and people are starting to connect dots, it's really putting them into something that they really enjoy. Like I enjoy actually finding out more about myself. I enjoy finding out more about the reason why I'm here. And then I also enjoy moving into different phases, like the all-knowing, working with my breathing, certain elements that I take, charging the body and piercing beyond my own perceptions as they are now. And so I would say for sure that things conclude and then things begin. We just saw the end of the sun of light. And then now we're into this process of discovering more about ourselves. So they say that the only thing that's guaranteed is change. So we should prepare for it and always welcome it. And so that's where I'm at. And that's where I would encourage people should do for themselves.
Okay, awesome. And this part of the show, we're coming to the end, but what I like to do is just open it up for you, meaning please go ahead and use this opportunity. If you want to get up on the soapbox one more time, that's fine. Or if you'd like to just go ahead and plug a few things, your website, any upcoming talks, really, you can use this opportunity to say whatever you want, Sevan.
Okay, awesome. Well, I first want to say thanks to End of Days Radio and to you personally for reaching out to me and getting me on the show in order to spread more clarity. We don't know who's going to listen to this and everything we're co-creating together, because we'll all be uniquely united every time we hear this conversation. And I would definitely tell anyone that's looking to get a little bit more information about this to check us out at secretenergy.com. That's the website. And then you can also get up-to-date information about what we're looking into, and even curated content that gives you things to learn. Also, we can get really deep into the spiritual thing. And we have to remember that can become like a period in high school for us after a while where, it should be almost like, and what do you mean that you have another life? Like you can go and hike, you could go and hang out with people that are on that same vibration. It's easy to find those kind of people now. You have Facebook, you have, different groups. So just remember, like always turn this into your favor. Like I do like one of those old scriptures. It says, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. And I would really say to people to look at all these things that they're experiencing or being told about, because that's another thing. Like there's a lot that we're being told, but how much of it have we actually experienced? And being afraid of something that you've never seen before is not going to be a good idea of how to approach things. And so there's ways to investigate things going on in the reality more. And, it behooves people to start to look for those, that clarity, because they'll just find more themselves. So that's it. You could check us out also at YouTube/Understanding. If you wanted to check out more information on our YouTube channel. And that's pretty much it. There's some recent recordings that contain, information specifically about the dream thing, if that's what you're interested in. So, you could kind of go back from the last uploaded video on the YouTube/Understanding and check those out there.
All right, awesome. Thank you once again. I had a great time. So much knowledge dropped here. And of course, I would love to do this again sometime. You're welcome on this show anytime, Sevan. But until then, awesome. Yeah, until then, you have a good night, my friend.
You too, Daniel. Thanks for everything.
And there you have it. That was Sevan Bomar. Oh my God, that was so good. Wow, I am blown away. It is so cool because sometimes people just keep talking and talking and you let them go. Next thing you know, you have 2.5 hours of just insanely good content that is going to change a lot of minds and possibly even change a few lives out there. So thank you once again to Sevan for not only showing up and taking so much advantage of this time here, but also for putting on a great talk and for actually, like I said, just, I so much appreciate when people actually appreciate it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So just thank you so much for your time, Sevan. And everybody, I've been holding back this urge to urinate for about an hour and a half now. And I don't have anything to pee into, so I had to just kind of hold it. But I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and take our usual break. And then we'll come back, and I got all kinds of things to talk about. No, the show is not over. I know we've been on air for a while, but it is not over. We're gonna go ahead and do the second half of our show as soon as I come back from break. So if you've got it in you, feel free to stay up with me because the night has only begun. Hello. Welcome back to End of Days Radio. This is your host, Daniel, coming at you in 3D, maybe soon to be 4D, but we'll see what happens. Oh boy, what a great interview. But here we are back, and we are ready to rock in our second half. This is what we call our Paranormal News and Listener Roundtable. I gotta come up with some kind of catchy jingle for that, like some kind of little intro for our Paranormal News and Listener/Fan Roundtable section. Let's go ahead and get right to it, shall we? Okay, so the first news story of the day. Let's see, what do we have here? Okay, this is coming from NCR or N. Oh, I was explaining that totally wrong. It's the National Catholic Register. So that's the name of the website, the National Catholic Register at ncregister.com. And this article says that this is coming from Exorcist. It's saying that demonic activity is on the rise. So you heard it, folks. Demonic activity is on the rise. Okay, it looks like that the actual Catholics themselves, the guys that are involved with this sort of thing, a particular guy this article mentions named Father Vincent Lampert, he seems to say that demonic activity is increasing. I believe it could be true. It could be due to a lot of things. It could be due to the degraded, sort of polluted planet that we live in right now. It could be because these elite guys have some kind of plan that they're furthering. So as they further this evil plan of theirs, the vibration of the planet drops more and more of these demonic beings get through. It could be that. It could be that we are indeed in the end of days, and just like it says in Revelations, towards the end, the whole earth is going to be kind of run rampant with these demonic beings. You know, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not a Christian, so to speak. I believe that there's a lot of wisdom in the Bible, and there's a message there for sure, but I don't know if I necessarily fall into that paradigm where I would say something like this article purports that there are more and more demons on the planet, but there might be. Who am I to say? It seems like there is some kind of increase. For example, if I go to YouTube, I see quite a few videos of people being possessed or taking their clothes off in public. A lot of this gets blamed on bath salts, like the dude that ate the guy's face down in Florida. But what's interesting about that story is they found out the guy was into voodoo. And we've talked about this on the show before, but a big part of voodoo is actually using drugs and trance states to allow yourself to become what's called a horse and allow a demon to take control of your body and go around and explore and do whatever demons like to do when they enter into a human body. But the term demon is so confusing. Are we talking about fallen angels? Are we talking about some sort of astral parasite? Are we talking about aliens? Are we talking about something else entirely? It's just such a catch-all term. It doesn't seem to really fit all of this type of activity that we see. It doesn't seem to really do the job. So I don't know if I like that word demon, but at the same time, with the absence of a better description, it seems to kind of fit. So I don't know. I've certainly seen my share of people that seem like they've got something in them. Like some of the most negative people that I've known in my life, they almost seem to have this really weird look in their eyes. So it looks like we got a caller calling in. Hello there.
Good evening, sir.
Why, hello, sir.
How are you, Daniel?
I'm doing good. I'm just buzzing off of this high from that great interview.
Fantastic. I wanted to chime in now that you're doing the paranormal news roundtable call-in part.
Okay. Sounds reasonable.
David Rockefeller died this week.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that. I wasn't sure whether to be sad or glad or what.
Well, one person that a lot of people believe was the head of the visible Illuminati. He was the public face of the one world government.
Yeah, I've seen all these different quotes from him, all sorts of stuff about population control, New World Order, all things along those lines.
Yeah, the most incredible thing, though, this week, the story that I caught on him, it was on Clyde Lewis's show, and I'm horrible because I don't remember the guest's name. He talked about David Rockefeller and Milton Rockefeller. They were into collecting voodoo artifacts. And they tried to collect, they have a vast collection of black magic voodoo artifacts, like clubs that you would kill somebody with, that they killed people with. And they sent their nephew to Papua New Guinea, and he got eaten by cannibals.
They sent their nephew to Papua New Guinea and he got eaten?
By cannibals.
What a bad move.
What the guest was trying to explain was the Rockefellers were into collecting voodoo artifacts. And some of these voodoo artifacts, they're like a doll. The belly has a door that opens up, and they can put shit in the belly as part of the intent when they're working a magic spell. So, how to, bring that up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've always thought voodoo was extremely creepy. I've just never really wanted much to do with it. I mean, we've had so many connections to it, this way and that way. For example, a past guest that was on this show, E.A. Coedding, he's all about voodoo. That's like his latest thing. He got really into it. That and many other traditionally black forms of magic, or the types that would be considered negative, I've always felt like it was looking into a place that is dangerous to go to, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's not a evil practice at all. Maybe it's a
The point the guy was trying to make, though, his very knowledgeable guess, was that for hundreds of years in every society, the ruling elite, the oligarchy, they conditioned their priests by making them give up their firstborn son in a sacrifice, ritual sacrifice. That goes back thousands of years, but people that are involved in these cults, they sacrifice children.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt that at all.
And it's
I
been
mean,
reported. To prove their work, that they're do anything for the cult.
Yeah, there's records even in the ancient Israel. There were a sect of Hebrews that worshipped, was it Moloch, one of those guys, and they were actually sacrificing children, and they had a whole ritual and everything, and it wasn't uncommon at all back then.
And Daniel, the oldest form of worship is human sacrifice, and the entire world was involved in it. If you go back 5,000 years ago,
I totally
cultures were doing it.
I totally agree that it seems that if anything, it's been covered up. Not only has there been a lot of human sacrifice covered up, but all sorts of torturous rituals and beliefs.
Well, they were talking too about how blood, David Rockefeller, did you know this, Daniel? He had 8 heart transplants.
He had 8 heart transplants?
8.
No, I had no idea. I guess that's what happens when you have more money than anybody else in the world. You can do things like that.
Well, he lived to be 101 years old.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I would be watching stuff on PBS, and they'd always say, oh, such and such program is brought to you by the Rockefeller Foundation. The Rockefeller Foundation. These guys have their
the beautiful, wonderful Rockefeller Foundation.
Yeah, these guys have their hooks in everything, and you can look into the past and see how much they have shaped our economy and our society and our very
I love
beliefs.
it. It's like, Daniel, I love it. It's like brought to you by the people who care. The Rockefeller Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I saw this one video, Todd, where they got this this guy. He wasn't a Rockefeller, but he was a Rothschild. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there have seen it. It's on YouTube. He's one of the Baron Rothschild guys, but they get him when he's coming out of his carriage, and they sort of corner him with the camera, and they're saying, it's a couple of these guys, they must be conspiracy guys or something, and they're going, oh, such and such Rothschild, you'll never have your New World Order, blah, blah, blah. And at first he kind of like rolls his eyes at it, and he's kind of like, you can tell he's reacting like, oh, come on, that's a bunch of bullshit. But then they keep kind of pressing it, and then he sort of just looks at the camera, and he's kind of smiling and laughing, and the look he has in his eye, it's almost like he's admitting it with that look in his eye, but I don't know.
Yeah. Like, you can't prove it, bitch.
Yeah, something like that. But
or whatever. He's like, what can you do? Because he doesn't even know, like George Bush, what protects them as they walk around playing their part as royalty. The kings and the queens, Daniel, they're just puppets on strings too, right?
Yeah, for sure. They are figureheads Not always. A lot of them tend to have more
No,
power than we think.
I mean, everybody is an individual. I'm not saying they're completely controlled, but goddamn, with the kind of technology we're talking about nowadays, fucking adrenochrome, these ruling elites, they do a lot of blood transfusions. And the earliest origins of them being involved in blood is like the vampire legends.
Oh, yeah.
And the elite always lived to be about 100 or something years old. Average society, Daniel, only lives about 70.
Yeah,
These
no
people
doubt.
live to 100,
Having
101.
medicines and physicians, and not having to work a manual labor type of job, and not smoking cigarettes and having a healthy diet. I mean, that stuff makes a big difference. You're not going to live for 100 years old if you're working in the coal mines. You'll be lucky if you see 40.
Well, they used to sell a product called corpse
Do you say corpse?
blood. At the turn of the century, you could buy blood.
And
in
what,
a bottle.
drink it or cook it or what?
And drink it. And people drink it, and they thought that it gave them longevity. But then they realized that there's different blood types, and then they switched to transfusions. They started to be able to do transfusions, and then they realized that you got to be the right type to transfuse blood. And then ever since they figured that out, the elite do blood transfusions constantly.
Oh, sure. What about that, what's her face? That vampire woman that lived, I think her name was Elizabeth Bathory?
Elizabeth Bathory, yes. Bathed in blood, giant bathtubs. That was when they thought that if you just bathed in it, they drank it. If they could have injected it back then, they would have. But
also, Vlad the
drinking it-
Impaler. Vlad the Impaler would sit there in front of all those impaled bodies, and he'd have himself a nice cup of some blood, some Muslim blood.
Daniel, they're claiming, I've heard the claim that if you replace your blood and you have cancer with some healthy young blood of the same blood type, your cancer will go away.
That's not true. That's not true. That's not going to happen.
It's what they do.
Yeah, but I'm not going to make cancer go away just by drinking blood. The cancer's
that's a claim. That's a claim. I'm not saying I've seen evidence of it. I just heard the claim, but
I don't doubt that these people are drinking blood, though. Look at Angelina Jolie. For a big part of her life, wasn't she carrying around a vial of her father's blood, or it was her brother's blood, or something like that?
Let me tell you. No, it was her husband.
Oh, it was
Billy
her husband.
Bob Thornton.
Oh, okay, I see.
And they took blood of their self and put it in vials, and gave each other a vial to hang around their necks or something. I think that went. But beyond that, Daniel, I was gonna. It's interesting. I was gonna talk about the voodoo thing. But the voodoo thing.
Uh-huh.
I think that there's some voodoo element to this, because if you think about all that's going on, this is old. These techniques go back thousands of years, and voodoo's one of the powerful. Voodoo's kind of a primal, more basic connection to the magical spirits. A voodoo doll, a curse.
Yeah, it's not altogether uncommon, though, because if you look into some of these other cultures and their particular beliefs, a lot of them have this idea that you can take spirits and put them into you. Sometimes it could be like serpent spirits or animal spirits and stuff like that.
Sometimes that's good. That's what they do there. They don't look at, over in Haiti, they don't look at that as a bad thing when they get possessed. You've seen those rituals.
Yeah, if you're building a house and this particular demonic beings is an expert in building houses, and you bring him into your body and he builds you an awesome house and then he leaves, hey, I'd be fine with that.
You want his help. They have like over in Hawaii, they believe in gods, the gods of the volcano, the different type of spirits. It's that kind of concept and energy.
Yeah, I'm just not doing that, though, because I don't really know the truth. I mean, if you let something in your body, yeah, it could be your subconscious or something like that, or it could be some totally benign spirit, but basically you're just opening the door to anything. You're just saying, hey, go ahead and take my body and do whatever you want with it, and who's to say it's going to leave when you want it to leave? Who's to say it's not going to linger or maintain some kind of connection with you?
Well, I think it's more like your guest was saying, that at a certain point you have to have that discernment, and then at another point you have to use the energy and the knowledge and the power to create what it is you want to see.
There's some cultures where before they meditate, they'll actually make a little rice ball for the spirits, so the spirits will be focused on the rice ball and they can go meditate without anything disturbing them.
Sounds like Japanese.
I don't know what culture it's from, but definitely one of those Asian cultures where they make rice balls. They weren't making curry, so...
One of my favorite children's stories was this, I forget what it was called, but it was about this Chinese lady that makes rice balls. And she makes this rice ball, and it falls down a crack in the floor, and she chases it, and it takes her to the underworld where there's these demons down there, and do you remember this story? Did you ever see this kid's stories?
No, but it's just another one of those stories. It's kind of like Enoch, where he is taken into the higher realms. The only difference is that sometimes you get taken into the higher realms and sometimes you get taken down into the lower realms. There's a lot of places you can go, most likely.
Well, yeah, there's the whole map. Look at the Kabbalah, all those different parts of the tree. Those are just psychological states that exist on a map, right?
Oh, I don't know about that. I think that those are actually like actual realms, because that's what they call them. They say these are different realms. Yeah,
it's a communication or classification system too, Daniel. It's not just a place and space. It's a way to talk about states of mind.
Possibly, I'm sure there's multiple ways you can look at it. It's like, okay, when you're a Freemason, most of what they teach you at first is complete bullshit. They actually teach you the wrong meaning behind symbols, but they aren't necessarily wrong. They can be true in their own way, but it's not the true meaning behind the symbol. You don't understand the true meaning until you get to the absolute highest levels. Then they say, oh, I'm sorry, Billy Bob. Turns out we've been lying to you this whole time. Now we'll start teaching you the real shit.
Who knows what's really going on? You and I have been talking recently about the artificial intelligence. I've mentioned once or twice about they must have a fucking computer running a lot of this at the top now. That's the only way you're going to be able to pull this off.
Yeah, Todd. In fact, on this show, we're going to be getting into that quite a bit. I've been talking to some people that have been the people that actually live in other countries that have been researching this very, very diligently. And there's going to be some information coming forward that is absolutely mind-blowing. I can't talk too much about it right now, but that's definitely the direction that we're headed in. And there's going to be some major discoveries announced on this show.
Sounds like some exciting programming, but Daniel, there's that voodoo element, and that's why I kind of had to call in. I wish I had called in earlier. I was kind of just blown away by your guest. I was just listening. But I wish I would have talked to him about the voodoo spirits. he was going in a voodoo direction once or twice, but I didn't get a chance to.
Oh
ask
yeah,
him, but
I could have talked to Sevan for probably 8-9 hours. He's one of those guys where you get him going and he just goes.
Ooh, it was smooth. I kind of disagree with him on Trump. I'm like, please, leave Trump. Either Trump's a fucking isn't real or he is, but he's our president. And let's give him a chance. That's my point.
I'm just reserving judgment until his term is over because, as you know, and many other people know, I was really pro-Trump. I was really trying to help him get elected. But yeah. I've kind of sobered up a little bit, and I just realized that, hey, this is a system of control, and they're not going to let some heroic person come in and change everything. Anybody that goes through that system is going to be completely vetted by them, is going to be somebody that's willing to play by the rules. And look at what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of favoritism towards big business owners. We're seeing a lot of negligence in terms of the environment. We're seeing some really bad policy in the Middle East. And there's also been talk of making marijuana illegal, going after abortion, just a lot of very negative things. So I'm jumping right the heck off the Trump bandwagon, and I'm just like, fuck politics at this point. I don't even want to. Of course, I'm not talking about this particular discussion, but I'm not looking to talk politics or anything like that because I'm just sick of it. I'm disappointed and I'm jaded.
Well, the truth is, I've seen some pretty spooky shit out of Trump too. And I'm going to be the first person that calls him out. More war, more bombs, more military industrial shit. That's bad.
Yeah, that's one of the main things is this whole idea that we need to beef up the military. And I'm not necessarily against that. If we can put a little bit more fear into some of these little Kim Jong-uns or some of these countries like China, that might be a good thing. But what I don't like is in Israel, for example, Trump wants to just completely side with the Israelis. And one thing that I liked a little bit better about Obama was I thought he was a little bit more fair to the Palestinian people.
Yeah, but, I'll tell you, Obama was better in some areas. As much as I dislike Obama, he did try to close Guantanamo. He did stop, torture stopped under Obama, supposedly, officially. So Obama did a couple good things.
Yeah,
but Obama
I don't think he's a bad guy.
Dropping bombs, and now Trump's dropping more bombs.
Yeah, another thing Obama did was he signed all this legislation to protect Monsanto. He also had his own travel ban, and like you said, he started a lot of wars and dropped a lot of bombs on people. And in my opinion, he didn't really cause the change that he promised us. But do I think that he's a bad guy? Do I think he's a devil or a reptilian hybrid or part of some conspiracy? No, he doesn't have those credentials. He's just a man like you or me. I don't have anything against. I don't like him. He might be a very evil man for all I know, but from what I see, I don't think he's a bad guy.
He was just the face they used to help you take the pill that was the 8 years of Obama. And that was, Daniel, a direct result of 8 years of Bush.
Yeah, no doubt. We had the Homeland Security Act, which changed our lives drastically.
Obama helped you swallow it.
Yeah, the big thing with Bush was, first of all, the illegal war that made no sense to anybody. And, of course, the Patriot Act and the Homeland Security Act, which completely changed our lives in a very negative way. Not that this stuff wasn't already going on. But
they lied to get everybody to go along with it right from the start.
Yep, very true. So there's definitely a plan.
There's a shadow government that existed long before the 9/11, and it had already created a giant shadow government that's already been spying on all of us all the time.
I have no doubt about that. That's absolutely true. It's provable. The people out there that are saying that it's not true or thinking themselves they're wrong. It is true, and it's very easy to back up with evidence because this stuff, this 3D stuff, the conspiracy stuff, we actually can prove it. So the people saying that there's no proof, they're absolutely wrong. It's the metaphysical alien type of shit that we have trouble proving.
Yeah, that's what they keep secret. But there's been that continuation of government COG. I think Dick Cheney's had 6 heart transplants.
Oh yeah, I mean, Todd, there's always the
these
possibility.
old people,
there's always the possibility that there is some kind of cloning or life extension going on with these people. Absolutely.
You know what my wife and I talked about? I asked her, do you think that when they get a heart transplant, they receive some genetic memory of the person that gave them the organ? And let me tell you what, my friend got a lung transplant. And he said after he got these lungs, his taste changed. Things he loved, he didn't love anymore. And then he developed for a taste for things that he never liked.
Like hot dogs?
No, but true story.
Yeah, that's really weird. I don't doubt it at all.
Like they got a genetic memory from the organ. You remember in the 80s there was a movie called The Hand, where a guy gets a transplant from a murderer.
Are you talking about the movie called Idle Hands?
I thought it was just called The Hand. But...
Well, there's a movie called Idle Hands where this guy, his hand goes crazy and it just has a mind of its own and it starts slapping him and killing people and doing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, it might have been the same movie, but he gets it transplanted onto him, and it's a murderer's hand. And then it's just constantly trying to kill him or somebody else.
You know what would be weird is if I got a penis from a big tall black guy and I had a penis that's like twice as big as the one I have now.
That would be weird.
I think that would actually improve my life, though.
Oh, you never know.
I'm Daniel, and I got a big black dong.
Kim Kardashian might call you.
That's what I'm talking about. That's how I'm going to get those
Daniel.
big booty bitches.
Ow! No.
You can do it too, Todd. We'll both get
I'm
transplants.
Married, happily.
No, I'm not saying nothing about your marriage. I'm saying, how's your wife going to feel?
At our party, at our end of days radio gathering, I could see it.
How's your wife going to feel when you come home with a huge, giant, 12-inch black dong?
Oh, yeah, that's not happening.
That's the right answer, Todd. That's the right answer.
There you go.
Oh, boy.
Anyways, I should let you go and then just listen to you. Love the show, my man.
All right. I thought you wanted to keep talking about black dongs, but I'll let you go.
Oh, well, now that we're talking about black dongs, you got me all hot and heated, yeah.
All right, Todd, I'm going to go. Thanks, buddy.
Okay, my man.
All right,
peace.
Bye. I had to go. That conversation was getting weird. It was my fault, but it was taking a very strange turn. All right. I mean, that would be weird, though, right? If I somehow got a transplant of some kind, like I got a new penis or a new hand or something like that, that would be so strange. I know we can't do it yet, but maybe one day we'll actually be able to do that. Or how about getting cat eyes or bat ears, or maybe having stripes? Like, I could make myself look really cool. Like, I could have tiger stripes and glowing cat eyes and some sort of prehensile tail that I can use to hold my cans of soda. I'll sip Mountain Dew with my prehensile tail. That would be badass. That would be way better than transhumanism. I'm talking about trans-animalism. That would be badass. Anyways, we got some other news stories to talk about, so let's keep this shit moving, right? Okay, so the next article on my list, this is from thechristiantruther.com. Oh, Christian Truther. Ay. This is going to be bad, right? Any sort of Christian website, you know it's going to be bullshit, right? Well, let's see. Let's try to keep some objectivity here. Okay, so this article says evolution. It's spelled Evilution. The secret Luciferian spiritual origin to one of the biggest hoaxes in history. Evolution. So basically what this article is saying is that there's this huge conspiracy in place, because we sort of know that there are some Luciferians at the top of this control scheme. Like there's a major Luciferian presence in there. We've even done shows about it in the past. And, how prevalent and how important this Luciferian agenda to the whole control grid, I don't know. I don't know how important it is, but it does seem to be there in some form. So basically, what this article is saying is that there's this huge conspiracy in place, and all these New Agers and all of these secret society people. Basically, there's this huge movement, kind of like our guest. He talked about that movement earlier, or it's linked to it, where Madame Blavatsky and her protege Alice Bailey, they started all these secret societies and these belief systems. They didn't start them, they sort of inherited them, but it started to spread through all the other secret societies, and this idealism and these particular people, they started to gain control of a lot of institutions and governments, and they're even linked to the United Nations and stuff like that. Well, supposedly they are the people that came up with this whole evolution thing in order to do some evil and take God all out of it and everything. Well, obviously, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I don't think that evolution is a bad way of looking at things. I think it's a good way of looking at things. It shouldn't be taken too far. It shouldn't remove spirituality and other ways of looking at things from the equation. But evolution, to me, makes perfect sense. I mean, you're at one stage, and just like a person goes from a baby to a grown adult, well, there's something like that happening in the natural kingdom. At one point, the earth was just a rock, and then it had trees on it, then it had water, or I guess it had water first before the trees, but you know what I'm saying? You see a natural progression in the universe, and to me, that doesn't destroy any spiritual element. How do you know that evolution isn't just creation? Meaning, maybe your idea of God started the whole Big Bang, or started things off, and evolution is just another step in that creative process. Is there such a big difference between everything happening at once and things kind of evolving to a state of perfection or a state of diversity? Is there such a big difference there? Why is there such a huge debate of creationism versus evolution? To me, that's what's called a false dichotomy, meaning we have two different things that are supposed to be opposing each other, but aren't really that different, that aren't really in conflict, that can actually coexist despite the way that it might seem. And what we do is we end up jumping on one side or the other, but in reality, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I think there's probably evolution, but who knows? Maybe some aliens or maybe some type of beings got up in there and made some changes or jump-started things. Who knows? But that doesn't rule out the possibility that there's some sort of supreme God or some force called God or something like that. That doesn't rule it out. So my opinion on evolution is that it's perfectly fine, and we can probably learn a lot from studying it, and we should study it and not turn a blind eye to knowledge or anything like that. Because if we're doing that, we're just kind of keeping ourselves in the Stone Age. And that's not to say that I believe in materialism or I only believe in evolution, because I don't. It's just that I don't think that denying it is going to get us anywhere. And I totally understand that there's not a whole lot of evidence to support it in the first place. I totally get that there's some major holes there. But to me, that's where the aliens come in. The aliens or the extra-dimensional beings, they came down and they started mucking up our genetics and doing all sorts of strange things to us. That's my belief. But you can believe what you want. You can believe whatever you want to believe. Okay. And next, let's see here.
Oh, this is just a little side note, all of you people out there. I just want to make it very clear that you should never drink old wine. Never, ever drink old wine. You see, I'm a little bit of an idiot sometimes, and I'm not a wine aficionado. I just started to get into it. And for some reason, I thought you could leave a wine bottle out after you opened it for years and years, and it would start tasting better and better. It shows you what little I know. But I was leaving these wine bottles out, and they were sitting there on my counter for years and years, and I was still drinking them. And they tasted weird. They tasted flat, and sometimes had little bits of stuff in them, but I thought that that was fine. I finally Googled it. Turns out, not only do you have to stick the damn bottles in the refrigerator, but they're only going to last up to around 3 days. 3 days is a little bit less time than a year and a half. So I don't even know why I'm still here. I don't know why I'm alive. I should be dead because I was drinking some really old-ass moldy wine. So people, please, if you drink wine, take the damn bottle and stick it in the refrigerator. Don't keep drinking it a year later. You will get sick. And I must have a strong immune system. I mean, with all this stuff in our environment and crap going on this planet, I must have a strong immune system to have been able to make it out of that alive. Because that was a really bonehead move. Oh. Okay. And the reason why I had been getting on this topic of wine in the first place, the reason why I wanted to go drink some wine or pull some year-and-a-half-old wine off of my shelf and drink it, was because I came across this thing online called the wine test. Basically, what you're supposed to do is you take some wine and some hydrogen peroxide, you swish it around your mouth for like 5 minutes, and then you spit it into a sink. And the idea is that when you do that, you end up spitting out these little fibers that you can see in the sink. And supposedly, these are the same fibers that are found in chemtrails, and there's some sort of foreign body that's being placed into our environment, either through chemtrails or our food supply or something like that. And the hypothesis is that these are actually some sort of nanotechnology, and you're supposed to take some rubbing alcohol and dump it on top of the fibers, and then they'll squirm around like worms, and that's supposedly proof that they're alive. Well, I did it, and sure enough, everything that was supposed to happen happened. I saw the fibers, I poured the alcohol on them, and they started wiggling around like worms, like they were alive. And hey, I don't know if this is some kind of unknown chemical process. I don't know if they're skin cells. I don't know if they're little bits of grape. I don't know what's in the sink, so I don't want to jump to conclusions. But it does kind of make me a little suspicious and worried, because I know that chemtrails are real. I see them flying over my house every day, and I don't know what they're spraying into the environment. I don't know what's going on. Is it entirely possible that we have some sort of nanotechnology being sprayed on us? Of course, because they say that technology that these black budget guys have is 50 to 70 years more advanced than what we have now. For example, the stealth bomber, it wasn't released until, the 80s, 90s, but people were seeing it flying around back in the 70s. That's just one example. So the idea is that because we see all of this stuff, like if you go to Google, you go to news, and you look up science stuff, a lot of it's going to be about nanotechnology. The idea is that the government has perfected this technology and is now using it to, who knows, spy on us, control us, make us sick. There's been links that people have found to Morgellons disease, meaning that they think that these fibers are getting into the body and they're either being issued remote commands to start creating these little wires that are coming out of people's bodies, or it's the body itself rejecting these little nanofibers. And this could all be a bunch of crazy paranoid conspiracy bullshit, and I really hope it is. But there does seem to be something there. This Morgellons thing, I can't explain it. It's disgusting. Have you looked at these pictures? Go to Google Images, search for Morgellons. Not only are there wires coming out of people's bodies, but some of them even look like little tubes. Some look like little insect legs. And some people are actually saying that these things are turning into little insects and jumping around. That sounds totally disgusting. That sounds like something straight off of that movie Prometheus. But it is a very prevalent conspiracy theory that's going on right now, and that's what we cover on this show. I do think it's possible, but I hope it's not true, because if it is, if our very environment is being infected with these nanoprobes, these nanites, nanoprobes, whatever they are, nanobots, then things are way worse and way further along than I would ever guess. The reason why I even did the test and everything was because I had Alfred on the show, a few episodes ago, and he actually brought it up to me, and he said that this is transhumanism. This is how they're turning us into robots. They're actually spraying these things in the atmosphere. And I hope it's not true. I hope I'm not freaking everybody else. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not freaking everybody else out. But I do want to look further into this. And part of the reason is because you guys remember Max Spears, right? The UFO researcher / super soldier, whatever he was. Whether he was a disinformation artist or agent, or if he was an actual, what he said he was, if he was a super soldier that was trained to do this or that, whatever he was, the fact of the matter is that now he is dead. He is dead. Whatever he was doing was enough to get him killed. To me, that says quite a bit. I tend to believe something more when somebody ends up being dead. And he had this black goo coming out of his mouth. Couldn't it be that these things were in his body and they were issued a remote command to turn on and just kill him when he started to go against his programming? Could that be possible? Could that be the case? Could that be reality? Or is it just a big show? Is it some kind of manipulation? I don't know. This stuff could drive you insane just thinking about, right? It's creepy, it's weird, it's sci-fi, yet it seems to be a part of our daily reality. Oh boy. Okay, so I did want to talk a little bit about my parting days, because as you could probably guess, especially due to some of the questions that I was asking our guests, or one of the questions, the one about psychedelic drugs, I have actually experimented a little bit with these drugs. Go figure, right? Who would think that somebody like me would be doing that? Everybody probably thinks that. But I did have a period of my life where these substances were a major part of it. Maybe too much. Maybe they were too big of a part of my life, to the point where I was almost kind of obsessed with them. Rather than doing the things that I should have done, like being on sports teams. I wrestled a little bit in high school, but I should have done it more. I should have pursued it more, because I wasn't too bad at it. Instead of doing stuff like that, I was trying to hang out with the stoner kids, with the kids that would play in bands, play guitars and stuff like that. And I was always looking to trip. Back then we call it frying balls. Like anytime you could get a hold of some LSD or some mushrooms and stuff like that, we'd call it frying balls. And I always wanted to fry balls, and I always wanted to fry balls with my friends. And I heard all this stuff about brain damage, about your life is going to turn to shit if you take some acid, or you're going to go crazy, your spine's going to melt, you're going to have chromosome damage. And even back then, we had the internet, so I researched all of this stuff, and I found out that it's not true. It just isn't. There's very little evidence that you can find that these things actually harm your body in any way. Now, can they hurt you psychologically and mentally? Oh, of course. I mean, you could have a bad trip, and you could get traumatized from it. But I did experiment with these things, and certain doors were opened. That's one way of putting it. I did experience what some people might term or might call enlightenment. I did experience states of enlightenment. I did experience states of all-knowing, connecting to some kind of God consciousness. I had all kinds of experiences like that. In fact, the reason why I completely quit all of that, and I don't do any of that stuff anymore. As you know, I'll do a little pot here and there. It's legal, so I have no qualms about using marijuana. I don't do it all the time, and I don't smoke it. I eat it. But that's it. I just eat my brownies. I don't do any sort of hardcore psychedelic, or I guess they call them entheogens now. I don't do it. And the reason why that is because it was getting too damn crazy. Yes, it was getting too damn crazy. All kinds of things were happening, things that I could not explain at all. I'm talking about precognition, telepathy. I'm talking about things that I was seeing and experiencing that even doing a show like this and being the type of person that I am, I'm embarrassed to even talk about this stuff because it will make me seem totally insane, right? So I quit because it was getting worse and worse. And all of these different substances, they had their own flavor and they had their own effect, and it was a unique experience. But every time, if it was one of these chemicals that worked on the serotonin and the pineal gland and all of that, it would open that door just a little bit more, and I would keep having more and more of these psychic sort of experiences. And I'm not telling you guys this so you run and do this stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying like, oh, you guys want to do this because you're going to become psychic. No, because it is so unpredictable. It is so weird. It will scare you. And a lot of other things can happen too, like the bad trips and stuff like that. I've even heard about people experiencing entities and things like that. I've sort of experienced that, but sort of not. It's really hard to explain with these things. But that's the truth. That is what happened. That is why I completely quit any sort of psychedelic, because it was getting too weird and I could not explain it. And that's part of the reason why I'm interested in this stuff now, like the psychic powers, the telepathy, and things like that, because I've actually experienced it. And I know I'm not the first one because I've read books and I've watched documentaries, and this exact same thing happened to a lot of those hippies back in the 60s, back when they were doing tons of this stuff. And in my opinion, that is why these substances are illegal, because they actually cause these types of experiences. I'm not saying you gotta believe me. Like I said earlier, you can believe whatever the fuck you want to believe. And that's what a lot of you do. You believe whatever you want to believe. That's probably what I do too. And it's fine. But I'm telling you the truth. Oh boy. I was supposed to talk more about my partying years, but somehow it turned into like a psychedelic discussion. Let me clarify. The reason why I not only stopped the psychedelics, but stopped partying was I found that a lot of the party type of friends, they were not actually really friends. They were sort of just people that you would hang out with to get high or get drunk. And they really did not give a shit about me. Like they literally not only did not care about my well-being at all, but if I did start to do good in any area, they'd start putting me down. They'd start acting passive-aggressive, taking shots at me, acting jealous. And that's not a real friend. That's like a Michael. Somebody that actually is claiming to be your friend, but is trying to keep you down. And there are people like that everywhere. And that's not me saying that there aren't real friends, because of course they are. But keep your eyes out. Keep them out for these people that are fake, these people that claim to be your friends and actually just want to see you fall. You got to watch out for people like that. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily, you necessarily need to ditch your friends because they act a little jealous once or something like that. You know what I'm talking about. You know that there are some friends out there that are just toxic, and you'd be better off without having them in your lives. But you can do what you want to do. And I'm not all-knowing, so every situation is different. I've just found that in general, the type of friends that you party with, party in quotes, they're not real friends. They're just looking to live in the moment, and they will completely drag you down. I'm not saying that it's wrong to party. Every young person is going to do it. It's a part of youth. It's a part of growing up. I'm not against it. But you know when enough's enough. You know when it's time to buckle down and quit that shit. You know when it's time to start focusing on more serious matters, maybe making money. It's not wrong to make money, but at some point you're going to realize, hey, I need to pay for a house and a car and all of this stuff, and I don't really have the time to be smoking pot in the cemetery anymore. You know what I'm saying? I hope so. Basically, be careful who you let in your life. Be careful who you keep in your life, because not only will it define you to a degree, but you can get wrapped up in all sorts of bullshit from people. All sorts of baby mama drama. All sorts of little jealousy tangents and mind games and dramas. So protect your circle. Keep it positive. Keep the right people in your life. The people that actually give a shit about you. The people that actually care about you and who you are and value you as a person. And that applies to men, women, significant others, people that you're dating as well. Don't keep moving forward with that person if they don't really appreciate you, if they're not really in it for you. Okay, that's enough of this long-winded rant about nothing. Let's get back to the news, right? Okay. All right. This is a good one. This comes from cosmopolitan.com. Hundreds report Justin Bieber shifted into a giant lizard in public. So apparently Justin Bieber is one of these reptilian hybrids, and he actually transformed into a lizard being in front of a bunch of witnesses. I don't even know what the hell is going on there. That's funny, for one thing. I've always thought Justin Bieber was one of these mind-controlled Project Monarch, MK Ultra sort of celebrity kids. But then again, I remember he's from YouTube, right? Isn't that how he got discovered? So he probably wouldn't be one of them, right? I don't know. But supposedly all these people saw him shapeshift into a lizard. I don't know if this is disinfo to make the whole reptilian thing look stupid. I don't know if these people actually saw something. There's always the possibility. We talked about people bringing spirits into themselves earlier. It's always possible that Justin Bieber's a completely normal kid, but he has one of these extra dimensional entities attached to him. It might be some kind of parasite. It might be there for energetic purposes, because Justin Bieber, as the center of all this attention, and a lot of sexual attention too. A lot of these women, even older women, are completely in love with Justin Bieber, so they might be feeding their sexual energy to this reptilian being named Justin Bieber. Or maybe this is just a completely bullshit, stupid article. Both of those possibilities seem very strong. I just don't know. Supposedly, people have seen the Queen do stuff like this. There's all these videos on YouTube of people shapeshifting, and most of the ones I've looked at, they look like special effects or some sort of interference. Like the signal is being interfered with. Like if it's somebody on TV, well, it's just some static in the signal, right? That's what most of them look like. But I have seen some where these people with big ass eyes, they're looking directly at the camera, and this second eyelid comes from the side, and it's like they have a sideways blinking eyelid underneath their real eyelid. And I have seen that several times on YouTube. I'm not saying this stuff can't be faked, but it looked real. So I highly recommend, if you have any interest in this reptilian stuff, go on YouTube and look up some of those big-eyed people, big-eyed shapeshifter people, or whatever they are, big-eyed hybrids, and check out some of those videos, because there's definitely something to those ones. I've seen a few of them where I saw some sort of appendage, some sort of inner eyelid that definitely wasn't a special effect, definitely wasn't some sort of screen malfunction or electronic thing. It was definitely real. It wasn't what do you call it, an artifact or a fragment of, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't a artifact like when you're watching cable and you see those little lines on the TV or little squares or black dots. It definitely wasn't that. So check those out if you have the time. And if you don't, I totally understand. Okay, so that's that. I've been on air for a while now. It's getting kind of late. I don't know how long I can keep this up, but there's still stuff I need to get to, so I guess I'll just kind of keep going here. I have a few letters from listeners that I want to read. I don't want to spend too much time on this, so I'll just read a few of them. This is stuff that's kind of accumulated over a while. This first question is a little bit interesting because I've already talked about this subject earlier. So this comes from Absinthe. I'm sure that's not his real name. And he's asking, Daniel, how big is your penis? I'm not going to answer that. And I'm not answering because it's small. I'm not going to answer that because that's not what type of show this is. This isn't a show where we talk about penises for 4 hours straight. We're not going to do that. I don't think it matters how big your thing is. I think it's more of a matter of what type of person you are. I don't think that it makes you more of a man because you have some kind of big 3-foot-long schlong. I've seen some dudes that, they're skinny meth heads that aren't worth their salt, and they have really big dongs, right? It doesn't do much for them. They're still druggy, tweaked out pieces of shit. They just have big things. So I don't think that there's anything admirable about having a big thing, like being a Ron Jeremy or something like that. If anything, you're just going to hurt some female, right? Because it's going to be too big for her. And after she's over the glory of seeing some big thing in front of her, she's going to get scared, and she's probably not going to like it very much. So I'm not going to answer that question. That's my business. That's a very close interpersonal thing. And, hey, 7 inches. There, I said it. Are you happy? You perverts? Whoever wrote me this letter, are you happy? 7 inches. There, I said it. Are we past this now? Are you going to keep sending me these letters? All right, let's move on. Okay, this one comes from Barry Elwin. And it says, Daniel, can you start talking more about Pizzagate? What? I talk about Pizzagate all the time. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Talk more about Pizzagate. You want every show to be about friggin' Pizzagate? How much is there even to talk about with Pizzagate? Do we even know for sure that that's real and not some kind of disinfo campaign or something like that? You really want me to spend that much time on Pizzagate? Have I not had guests on and specifically asked them about Pizzagate and about ritual abuse? Did I not ask the guest tonight about Pizzagate? I know that he kind of got cut off in his answer, but part of the reason why I didn't follow up on that is because I'm kind of sick of talking about Pizzagate. I mean, do we have to make everything about Pizzagate? Pizzagate, 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 Pizzagate? It's getting old, right? I think that Pizzagate is definitely something to look into. I think there's something going on there. But it's also a distraction because this very same thing is going on in like a million other places. The Catholic Church, that's just one example right there. And all kinds of other institutions have pedophilia going on linked to world governments and rich elite and stuff like that. So I think we need to look more at that other stuff instead of being hyper focused on Pizzagate all the time. I think we need to look into worldwide systematic pedophilic abuse everywhere instead of being hyper focused on Pizzagate. And like I said, I'm just kind of tired of talking about it. I'm not denying that it's real or that there's something there. I'm not even denying that Hillary and Bill are kissing cousins, and it goes all the way back to Arkansas, back before they were politicians, when they were just cousins. I'm not denying any of that. But I'm not going to sit here and just talk about Pizzagate endlessly. I know that there's some shows that are doing that. I'm not going to do that. Does that answer your question? You want me to talk about Pizzagate more? Come on, Barry Elwin. If that is your real name, Barry Elwin. But that sounds like some freaking name of some kind of forest elf or something. Barry Elwin. Okay, next letter. This comes from a gentleman named Dolan. That's Dolan. Dear Daniel, Michael Jackson is a sick pedo. Quit being in denial because he is your hero. Oh, Dolan. You just hit the red button. Michael Jackson was not a pedo, for one thing. He wasn't. You think that he was because the media released all these articles during the trial that were completely false. They were sensationalist articles that were exaggerating things. And what that caused was it caused the public perception of Michael Jackson. It caused everybody to think that he's guilty. But if Dolan, if that is your real name, Dolan, if you go into the court documents, the records, and you actually research this stuff instead of forming conclusions, you're going to find that most of the things that you think happened actually didn't. For example, the thing about the kid identifying Michael Jackson's marks and his color of his body when he was naked. A lot of people think that the kid was able to identify the spots or the color or identify some kind of characteristic of Michael Jackson's naked body that proved that he was naked in front of the kid, right? A lot of people think that. I explained that really bad. But a lot of people think that, but it's not true. That is not true. Actually, what happened was Michael took his clothes off and they found that the color of his skin was the opposite of what the kid said. Okay? So, Dolan, I highly recommend you actually do your research. And I like Michael Jackson, but I don't have posters of him on my wall. I'm not sitting there trying to dance like Thriller. I'm not that big of a fan. I am a big fan, but I'm not like obsessed with him. I haven't been into him since childhood. It was more of a thing I got into as an adult. And I just recognize that he's innocent because I've looked at both sides and I've looked at the case and I've looked at the evidence. In fact, I'm probably going to be doing a Michael Jackson is Innocent special on this show in the near future. I'm kind of lining that up. What we're doing now is we're looking around the world and we're finding experts on Michael Jackson. We're putting together a super group so that we can put this show together in the future. It's kind of a side project, but it's going to happen. And then when you, Dolan and everybody else, when you actually hear that episode, you're going to be able to come to your own conclusions. Okay? Dolan? Yeah, a-hole? You got that? Okay. That's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much it. I mean, I could keep going, but I've been on air for like 4 hours, and we weren't ever supposed to do the show for this long. So let me go ahead and wind it up. If you like listening to this show, go to endofdaysradio.com. In fact, every Saturday night, starting at 7:45, go ahead and join us in our chat room, where you can join me and all the other hardcore fans of End of Days Radio as we rage into the night and as we party hard into the end times. Please subscribe to End of Days Radio on iTunes, as well as Stitcher, as well as friending me on Facebook. That's The Real End of Days Radio. You can also subscribe on YouTube, but mainly just go to endofdaysradio.com. If you want to add me on Skype, that's NinjaShoes777. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that's @NinjaShoes. Oh, by the way, speaking of Ninja Shoes, stop by ninjashoes.net if you're a fan of mixed martial arts or pro wrestling. That's sort of my other thing. So if you're interested in those things, you might want to check that out. We've got some major shows coming up. The next show is going to be... Actually, I'll get back to you on that because my next show is going to be a special date and time. I'm going to be talking to Terrell Croft about the Black Star on March 29th. That's going to be a special 2 p.m. show, so check that out. And I have all sorts of other guests lined up, but it's kind of tentative, so I don't want to announce those yet. That call-in number, that's 209-348-9810. If you're interested in putting together a funny bit for the show, feel free to do so. You can call that Skype number and leave a message if you want to do that. If you're interested in appearing on the show, go to endofdaysradio.com. Either get my email off of there or go to the Contact Us page. You have to do the email right now because I'm working on that Contact Us page. If you want your music played on the show, contact me as well. If you're an artist that is having trouble getting exposure and you would like me to play some of your music, go ahead and hit me up and let me know what you got. Send me some samples and we'll see what's going on. I think that's everything. So Once again, everybody, thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for putting up with a 4-hour show. I hope that some major knowledge was dropped on your head tonight. I hope that you're coming out of this feeling a little bit stronger, a little smarter, a little wiser. I hope that you join me next week. I hope that you keep listening to the show. I thank you very much for your support. If you want to donate to the show, go to endofdaysradio.com and look for that donate button. If you want to donate $5 and help keep the servers going and all of that jazz, I do so very much appreciate that. And remember, from here on out, anybody that donates to End of Days Radio, I'm going to be shouting out your name at the end of the show, just so I can show my appreciation to you guys for doing that, because I do appreciate it so much. And otherwise, hey, that's it. That is it. You guys have a great night. Join me next week. Remember to stay spiritually strong. Remember to not let those demonic beings drag you down and make you depressed or make you give up. This is a fight, so you got to keep fighting. Keep your head up. If you need somebody to talk to, I'm always there for you. Let's keep it real. Let's be real. Let's not be fake. Let's be real. If you got a criticism, let me know. If you got anything you want to compliment, let me know. I'm always here, and I'm always listening, and I want to make this better and better. All right, you guys. Good night.
Winter's coming.
The king has returned from the broken ruins of Babylon. This is the end of days.